Chapter 2451. Western Continent Situation, Establish a City? Feng's request stunned Adolphe for a moment. He even wondered if this guild leader was pulling his leg. If Yan Shaoqian had heard Feng, she would assume the swordsman had either lost his mind, or he was dreaming. As on the Eastern Continent, players could establish guild towns and cities in the West, but because of a few differences, there were far fewer guild towns and cities on the Western Continent. One difference was the fact that the various NPC kingdoms and empires left the management of almost all of their towns and cities to the Adventurers Association, which, in turn, entrusted matters of security to the various guilds in the form of quests. This forced the various guilds to invest tons of manpower in the NPC towns and cities management, ensuring their authority. Hence, the Western Continent's various powers severely lacked manpower, and very few were capable of establishing guild towns or cities of their own. There was another major difference that contributed to the various powers' unwillingness to establish guild towns and cities. The demonic creature armies. The invading demonic creatures' attacks weren't limited to towns and cities within a country's borders. Occasionally, they would also besiege towns and cities deep within kingdoms and empires. Regardless of where the various powers established their guild towns or cities, they'd still have to deal with the demonic creatures' invasion. These demonic creature armies weren't like the monster sieges on the Eastern Continent. They operated like kingdoms and empires' well-trained NPC armies. They could even use war weapons against towns and cities. Meanwhile, guild towns and cities didn't have the support of a large number of NPCs like NPC towns and cities. Guilds would have to hire a limited number of NPC soldiers and rely on their own members to stop these demonic creatures. It was easy to imagine how much manpower would be necessary to protect a guild town or city. This was why so few powers had established their own guild town or city on the Western Continent, and those that managed the feat were undoubtedly powerful. At the very least, a power would need to be on par with a first-rate guild to maintain a single guild town or city. Only those that ranked among the top of first-rate guild could maintain 2 guild towns or cities. It'd be no exaggeration to call them pseudo-superpowers. And yet, Feng wanted Divine Tribe to help him establish a guild city on the Western Continent. If he were asking this of any other superpower's upper echelon, they'd likely throw him out the door. This wasn't a partnership. It was daylight robbery. Guild leader Black Flame, are you aware of the situation on the Western Continent? Establishing a guild city here is even more difficult than you imagine. Even now, Divine Tribe only has the power to maintain 5 guild towns and cities, Adolphe explained after taking a moment to calm himself. Constructing a guild city on the Western Continent wasn't difficult, but protecting it was. No ordinary power could afford the amount of manpower and resources it would require. Zero Wing only had 10 players on the Western Continent right now. Even if Feng were heaven-defyingly strong, he couldn't defeat an entire army of demonic creatures by himself. It would be up to Divine Tribe to dispatch a player army to protect Zero Wing City, and in doing so, Divine Tribe would likely have to invest more in the endeavor than it would gain from its alliance with Zero Wing. Zero Wing was only a pseudo-superpower in the East right now. It didn't have much influence, and it could only secure a limited amount of resources. Moreover, the manpower Divine Tribe would have to invest would be manpower the guild couldn't use in the future. It simply wasn't a worthwhile trade. I understand how difficult it is to establish a guild city on the Western Continent, which is why I'm asking for Divine Tribe's help. Feng nodded while chuckling. If your guild can agree, I am willing to purchase 3 million magic crystals of rare materials from Divine Tribe at market price. Feng knew a little about the Western Continent situation, so he knew that establishing a guild city here would be a major challenge, especially for Zero Wing, a guild that didn't even have a hint of a foundation in the West. However, a guild city was necessary for Zero Wing's future development. Without one, the guild wouldn't have a foothold in the West and would be subjected to the local power suppression. This was why the various powers, who could travel between the continents, always established strongholds in both places. The Azure Chamber of Commerce's Demonstone Town, which stood outside of the Fire Dragon Empire, was one such example. With its own trade hub, Azure didn't have to worry about superpower suppression, even if they grew jealous. He also needed a guild city to deal with an even greater problem. More powers would establish routes between the 2 main continents as time passed, and when they did, Zero Wing would face even more competition. Even Divine Tribe might find a way to the Eastern Continent, and when it did, it would sell its resources in the East rather than rely on Zero Wing as a middleman, earning more profits as a result. Thus, It was imperative that Zero Wing have its own guild city on the western continent. 3 million magic crystals? Adolphe's eyes grew wide as he stared at Xueqi in shock, and his breathing grew labored. He had never dreamed that Zero Wing was so frighteningly wealthy. Are you telling me the truth, guild leader Black Flame? Magic crystals were hard currency on the western continent. Players could easily buy certain rare materials with magic crystals, while they couldn't do the same with coins. Vendors even offered discounts if players were willing to pay with magic crystals. The western continent wasn't like its eastern counterpart. Not only were magic crystals scarcer, but demand for them was higher as well. Take the combat runes the various powers used, for example. Magic crystals were the main material to craft these combat runes. This was precisely why Divine Tribe had sent one of its trump card legions to capture Azure's demonic silver mine, despite it only being a grade 3 vein. The mine dropped magic crystals. 3 million magic crystals. It was an astronomical amount to any of the western continent's superpowers. Not only would securing 3 million magic crystals allow Divine Tribe to surpass other superpowers when exploring level 100 neutral maps, but it would also resolve the guild's lack of materials for its combat rune research, allowing Divine Tribe to craft Tier 3 combat runes. Divine Tribe would be able to truly stand among the various superpowers. It might even have the potential to grow stronger than the continent's existing superguilds. Of course, but my offer does depend on your sincerity in our negotiations, Great Elder, Xueqi replied. When he saw the burning passion in Adolphe's eyes, he could not help but marvel at the magic crystal's effects. Although Xueqi had been aware of how valuable magic crystals were on the western continent, he had never expected the continent's powers to be this desperate for them. Adolphe was on the cusp of becoming a peerless monster himself, yet even he seemed intensely excited at the prospect of so many magic crystals. After a moment of hesitation, Adolphe gritted his teeth and said, "Deal. I can represent Divine Tribe in agreeing to your demands. However, Divine Tribe can only dispatch 80,000 elites and 20,000 experts to help you defend your city. Whether or not these players will be successful will depend on your arrangements. An army of 100,000 is sufficient, but I will need to borrow one of your trump cards to capture a city," Xueqi agreed, nodding. An army of 80,000 elites and 20,000 experts was essentially the limit that any first-rate guild in the East could dispatch to a guild town or city. Unfortunately, maintaining the western continent's NPC towns and cities needed too much manpower. That won't be a problem. I'll send McCaffrey's legion to assist you. However, I must warn you. If our legion loses more than 30% of its players, they will retreat. Xueqi's additional request didn't surprise Adolphe. Capturing an existing hostile NPC city was the fastest way to establish a guild city in the West. Xueqi and Adolphe then signed a contract, solidifying their agreement. The contract stipulated that Divine Tribe would gather the rare materials Xueqi requested within 7 days and grant Xueqi access to a 100,000-man army to help him protect Zero Wing City for 3 months. In exchange, Xueqi would pay Divine Tribe 3 million magic crystals. Divine Tribe would also become Zero Wing's sole ally in the West, and any materials Zero Wing required from the western continent would be purchased from Divine Tribe, unless another party could offer the materials at a lower price. Once the contract was signed, McCaffrey was instructed to return with his legion to Silver Lion City. Xueqi was then given full authority over the legion. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Silver Lion City, Divine Tribe's guild residence. Guild leader Black Flame, may I know what your plans are? With our current combat power, there are only a few resource cities in level 90 maps that we can capture. Considering the difficulty of protecting the city, I suggest we capture a resource city in a level 80 map instead, McCaffrey recommended as he pointed to areas on the map he held. Capturing a resource city in a level 90 map would be quite difficult due to the level 100 plus NPCs or monsters that protected the cities. They would also encounter level 100 mythic combatants. Capturing a city in a level 80 map would be far less of a challenge. Although these areas were a lower level, guild cities could be transferred to a different location once they met the requirements. Moreover, Zero Wing was merely trying to secure a foothold on the western continent, not contest for hegemony. Capturing a resource city in a level 80 map would more than serve its purposes. No, I'm not interested in these cities. I want Star Valley's Starlight Fortress, Xueqi declared, shaking his head as he pointed to a location several kingdoms away from the Silver Moon Empire. To be precise, he indicated a fortress in Star Valley, a forbidden land in the southern region of the Western continent. Securing this fortress was his main goal in visiting the West. Chapter 2452. Steel Giant reappears as soon as Xueqi finished his statement. The meeting room full of several dozen players fell deathly silent as Divine Tribes members turned to give Xueqi disdainful looks. This guy's really ambitious. Crap. Star Valley? Does he think we're his personal subordinates? He actually wants us to go on a suicide mission. The Western continent's various superpowers were very familiar with Star Valley. They all dreamed of owning a town or city in the map. Not only was Star Valley rich in ores, but it was also home to plenty of ancient ruins. In addition, Star Valley housed one of the only 2 known God Mod regional dungeons on the Western continent. It was everyone's target for exploration and capture. And Xueqi wanted to capture the Starlight Fortress in Star Valley. Guild leader Black Flame, that area is a level 100 plus forbidden land. I'm afraid you overestimate the Silver Lion Legion. Even if with the Great Elder's 100,000-man army, I doubt we'll even get through the Starlight Fortress's gate, much less capture it, McCaffrey insisted. Rather than get angry at Xueqi's goal, he offered a bitter smile. If Divine Tribe had the power to capture the Starlight Fortress, it would have done so long ago. There were too many benefits to owning a fortress in Star Valley to ignore. No superpower could ignore the temptation. However, not a single superpower had successfully captured one of Star Valley's fortresses. McCaffrey acknowledged that Xueqi was incredibly strong, beyond the reach of ordinary Apex experts, but a handful of players wouldn't be enough to capture a fortress, especially one in a forbidden land. One would need an extremely powerful army to succeed. I understand your concerns, Vice Commander Afray. I've done my own research on the Starlight Fortress. I am sure, with the Silver Lion Legion's help, we can capture it, Xueqi explained. During his previous life, Star Valley had been extremely famous on the Western continent due to its abundant resources. The fortresses in the Forbidden Land were gold mines, and the various powers had investigated them thoroughly. Even a second-rate guild like Shadow had learned plenty about these fortresses. After considering the Silver Lion Legion's strength, Xueqi had decided that the Starlight Fortress was their best option. The Starlight Fortress was also one of the few fortresses that they had any chance of capturing. Star Valley was indeed a level 100+ neutral map, and as such, it was a dangerous location, even to veteran Tier 3 players. However, that was precisely the reason that Xueqi wanted it. Star Valley's fortresses had survived since ancient times, so they contained legacies that were far stronger than anything from the current era. The human race had had far more Tier 3 individuals than it did now. In fact, completing their promotion to Tier 3 hadn't been nearly as difficult during ancient times. But the human race had eventually lost many of their legacies in the countless wars since, making it far more of a challenge to reach Tier 3. If he could capture the Starlight Fortress, Zero Wing's Tier 3 experts would gain a massive boost in strength. Since you've made up your mind, I suppose I have nothing more to say, Guild Leader Black Flame. We can set out once the Silver Lion Legion has rested, McCaffrey conceded. Seeing Xueqi's confidence, he gave up trying to dissuade the swordsman. Divine Tribe had already forged an agreement with Xueqi, and it was up to him which town or city they attacked. Whether or not they succeeded was none of his concern. Following which, the Silver Lion Legion's 8,000 members prepared for their expedition to Star Valley. After the meeting, McCaffrey gave his report to Adolphe. He wants to capture one of Star Valley's fortresses? Doesn't he realize that Star Valley is a special forbidden land, in which berserk skills are prohibited? Adolphe was a little surprised when he heard the news. Players couldn't rely on their berserk skills in the Star Valley, which was why the various superpowers had so little hope of capturing its fortresses. Those fortresses strengthened the mythic monsters in the area, giving them far greater combat power than ordinary mythic monsters of the same level. Without berserk skills, not even Tier 3 players had a chance against those mythic monsters. Furthermore, each of Star Valley's fortresses contained more than one mythic monster. Based on the various superpowers reports, each fortress was guarded by at least 3 mythics. Some even had 5. A ton of Great Lords and Grand Lords had also garrisoned these fortresses. Just thinking about fighting all of those powerful monsters made Adolphe's skin crawl. Even with Divine Tribe's trump card, the Tier 4 Hero Summoning Scroll, they couldn't capture a fortress of that caliber. Xueqi, however, insisted on accepting the challenge. He is adamant that he's done his research, and he's confident that we can capture the Starlight Fortress, Crimson Witch explained from beside McCaffrey, her tone dripping with contempt. At this stage of the game, the various superpowers had barely scratched Star Valley's surface. They had barely begun to exploit the Forbidden Land's resources. To truly capture one of the Star Valley's fortresses, the various superpowers would have to wait until they had several thousand Tier 3 experts under their command. Without those numbers, killing the fortress's great lords and grand lords would be a problem. Not to mention the mythic monsters. I want all of you to be careful. If you lose over 20% of your forces, retreat immediately, Adolphe instructed after giving the matter some thought. The various superpowers have already begun to raid level 100 team dungeons, and they will conduct many more large-scale operations in the future. We can't afford to suffer serious losses at this crucial moment. Level 100 team dungeons are our guild's top priority. Understood, McCaffrey replied. He shared a similar opinion with the Great Elder. It was far better to focus their attention on raiding level 100 team dungeons than aim for an unrealistic goal like capturing the Starlight Fortress. Level 100 team dungeons had the weapons and equipment they needed to boost their strength by a large margin. That equipment would also help the guild's Tier 2 experts complete their Tier 3 promotion quests much sooner. Their guild would only grow stronger as a whole if they had more Tier 3 players. Following which, McCaffrey met up with Xueqi's group at the teleportation hall with the Silver Lion Legion in tow. They teleported to the Golden Sands Kingdom, the closest country to the Star Valley. The Golden Sands Kingdom was also a desolate country, with 80% of its territory comprised of desert. Once they had reached the Golden Sands Desert, the group continued for another 10 hours or so on mounts to reach the Star Valley's outer region. When the group arrived, the mighty Silver Lion Legion stunned the various major powers experts in the area. Although the Legion members had concealed their identities with black cloaks, their intense auras drove off any Tier 3 experts in their way. Finally, after another 3 hours of travel, Xueqi and his small army reached the top of a forested hill a short distance from the Starlight Fortress. From this vantage point, they could all see the massive tower in the middle of the forest and the sturdy walls that surrounded it. Oh, people have made it here already? Xueqi was a little taken aback to see a group of players fighting a short distance away from the fortress. Star Valley was a level 100+ forbidden land, and very few players had the strength to grind in its outer region, much less near the Starlight Fortress. The Starlight Fortress was situated on the boundary between the Star Valley's inner and outer regions. Even the weakest monster here was a level 105 lord, and the strongest was a level 110 mythic boss. Not even the various superpowers' main forces dared to approach this area casually. And yet, a group of players fought near the fortress's entrance. It was astounding. There were only 500 members of the team, and every one of them was an independent player. What a powerful adventurer team. They have over 30 Tier 3 players on a 500-man team, and the lowest level among them is level 105. This team can practically rival a top-ranked first-rate guild's main force, Crimson Witch commented. Of course, when Xueqi's group had noticed the adventurer team, the members of that team had noticed Xueqi and his small army. There's so many of them, boss. What should we do? A level 106, Tier 3 ranger asked the robust man tanking a level 110 Grand Lord ranked archaic species. Although this robust man only wore leather armor and wielded a pair of gauntlets as weapons, a layer of strange energy enveloped his form, which drastically reduced the amount of damage he took from the Grand Lord's attacks. Even when the Grand Lord successfully landed a hit, the man only lost around 20,000 HP. To Tier 3 players, this amount of damage was practically negligible. This quest boss is already in the red. Ignore them for now. If they dare try to steal our kill, we'll drag them down with us. The robust man growled. His gaze contained no fear, even after he noticed the Silver Lion Legion's overwhelming numbers. I agree. I have checked their mana signatures. They might have more players, but only 70 of them are Tier 3 players. If it comes down to a fight, we'll make them suffer. A ruthless man, who wore similar leather armor and wielded a great sword, agreed with a sharp nod. Any other adventurer team would have likely fled if they encountered the Silver Lion Legion, but they were different. They'd never back down from a fight, even if they faced an army of 8,000 players with several hundred Tier 3 experts. Guild leader Black Flame, should we make them leave? McCaffrey asked as he turned toward Xueqi. They were here to capture a fortress. Even if they were merely a slightly powerful adventurer team, outsiders could affect the outcome of their operation. However, as Xueqi was their commander this time, and McCaffrey decided to seek his guidance, rather than take action immediately. That won't be necessary. We'll just do our own thing, Xueqi said, shaking his head. He had no intention of clearing out the area. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. If we don't force them to leave, Guild Leader Black Flame, we won't be able to besiege the front gate, McCaffrey insisted, exasperated. The Starlight Fortress only had one entrance, and it was the least protected area. Thick walls that were 12 meters high surrounded the fortress on every other side, and they were treated with special magic that prevented players from vaulting over them. In addition, many level 110 Great Lord and Grand Lord ranked elemental guards paced atop the walls. Not only could these elemental guards launch long-range attacks, but they also had AoE spells. Those monsters would likely bombard them to smithereens before they could destroy the fortress's walls. Before McCaffrey could continue, however, Xueqi retrieved a steel giant that blotted out the sky. The Crimson Dragon Flying Ship. Chapter 2453. Crimson Dragon Flying Ships. Might a flying ship. When Divine Tribes members saw the gigantic Crimson Dragon Flying Ship, their eyes nearly fell out of their sockets, including McCaffrey and Divine Tribe's other upper echelons. The Crimson Dragon Flying Ship was massive. They had previously thought that flying mounts dwarfed land mounts, but compared to this, flying mounts were little more than children standing before an adult. So, this is the rumored flying ship? McCaffrey could not help but marvel at the Crimson Giant and its glowing runes and magic arrays engraved on the hull. Even the ship's mana mesmerized him. As one of Divine Tribe's upper echelons himself, he had heard about Zero Wing's flying war weapon, but seeing the real thing in person still shocked him. Before a steel giant like this, monsters and player armies were meaningless. When the adventurer team fighting in the distance saw the Crimson Dragon Flying Ship, some even forgot about the monsters they fought for a moment. Only after the monsters' attacks through them did they recover their senses. What is that? Crap! Is it really necessary to go that far? The members of the adventurer team felt stifled and afraid as they gazed at the flying ship. The confidence they had held on to began to wane. Boss, what should we do? Look at those bastards. We are only a team of 500, yet they've revealed that thing to intimidate us. The ruthless greatsword-wielding man cursed as he stared at the distant flying ship. With the weapons they had on hand, the idea of fighting the steel giant was a joke. It would be akin to fighting a tank or fighter jet with sticks. The two sides' combat power was on entirely different levels. Meanwhile, the robust man, this adventurer team's commander, watched the ship with a grim expression. Even if he had to face several dozen Tier 3 experts all by himself, he would still have the courage to put up a fight. He was even confident he could escape with his life even if he couldn't win. However, faced against the Crimson Dragon Flying Ship, he wasn't even confident in being able to escape. At this stage of the game, any player that spent considerable time in a major NPC city knew what a flying ship was. And although most didn't know exactly how powerful they were, it was easy to guess. Flying ships could fire magic cannons from the air, and even the weakest magic cannon had peak Tier 3 power. Moreover, magic cannons' attacks were AoEs. Players who couldn't fly would be nothing more than moving targets for such a vessel. Right now, their team was at the Crimson Dragon Flying Ship's complete mercy. If the players piloting the ship wanted them dead, they wouldn't even get a chance to flee. While the adventurer team panicked, Aqua Rose and her comrades boarded the ship while Divine Tribes members watched. Vice Commander Afray, I'll try to open a break in the wall as quickly as possible. I'd like you to form a defensive line below the ship to clear out the monsters that will flood out of the fortress and help protect the Crimson Dragon Flying Ship from the fortress's flying monsters. Xueqi addressed McCaffrey, who was still in a daze. Any other power would have to enter the fortress through the front gate, but with the Crimson Dragon Flying Ship, it didn't matter where Xueqi's army attacked from. Hearing Xueqi's instructions snapped McCaffrey out of his daze, and pulling his gaze away from the flying ship, he turned to Xueqi, advising, "Do you really want to go in through the wall, Guild Leader Black Flame? That fortress has survived since ancient times, and its walls are much stronger than those of a modern fortress. Even with a flying ship, I'm afraid it'll be a challenge to break down the wall." He had still dismissed Xueqi's intentions of capturing the Starlight Fortress, but now, he began to believe that this swordsman had the means to pull it off. Opening a hole in the fortress's defenses was the most difficult aspect of trying to capture one. All fortresses had an auto-repair feature. If players couldn't exploit that weakness before the wall began to repair itself, there would be no hope of success. Naturally, The weakest point in the fortress's outer defense was its front gate. The walls were far sturdier and had much higher durability in comparison. Relax. We should have enough time. As long as the Silver Lion Legion can keep the flying monsters off the ship, we'll be fine, Xuefeng said, chuckling at McCaffrey's concern. Can your legion accomplish that? Destroying the front gate was the simplest method of creating a weakness in the fortress's defense, but if players opened a path by destroying a section of the wall, the monsters within would be far easier to deal with. The fortress's walls were reinforced by magic arrays, which were linked to form a complete array that enveloped the entire fortress and strengthened its allied forces. This was why the monsters within were so much more challenging to defeat than monsters in the fields. If players could destroy a section of the walls, however, they could damage the magic array engraved onto it. This, in turn, would weaken the strengthening effect the array had on the monsters within. Unfortunately, destroying the walls was normally incredibly difficult for players, many times more difficult than destroying the gate. Teams that struggled to capture a fortress wouldn't resort to attacking the more fortified walls. This was precisely the reason that Xuefeng dared to challenge the Starlight Fortress. Without current players' strength, capturing it would have been impossible. Even the weakest fortress in Star Valley was garrisoned by hundreds of thousands of monsters, of which several thousand were Great Lords, and several hundred were Grand Lords. Moreover, these monsters would respawn after a certain amount of time. If players didn't have the DPS to slay them all quickly, these monsters could even outlast a superpower's army. Of course, players didn't necessarily have to clear out the monsters to capture a fortress. They only needed to defeat the fortress's guardian boss, but until they cleared out a certain fraction of the monsters, those monsters would become a problem during the guardian boss fight. Fortunately, only low-grade elemental creatures occupied the Starlight Fortress, and they weren't very intelligent. Not even the mythic-ranked elemental creatures. They operated almost purely on instinct. If the fortress were occupied by creatures like magic elves, no one would have a hope of capturing it before players reached Tier 5. That won't be a problem. As long as we don't have to deal with the mythic monsters, there's no way the monsters without the fortress's buff will break through the Silver Lion Legion's line, McCaffrey confidently declared. However, he still preferred that they attack the front gate instead. If they could actually capture the Starlight Fortress, they would have performed a miracle on the Western continent. Their names would go down in history. Wonderful. Then, I'll leave the Legion's commands to you, Vice Commander Afray, Xuefeng said, nodding in satisfaction. He then boarded the Crimson Dragon flying ship and left the rest to McCaffrey, who was more familiar with the Silver Lion Legion. Crimson Witch and McCaffrey's close companions were speechless as they watched Xuefeng board the Crimson Dragon flying ship. It was clear now that they had a high chance of capturing the Starlight Fortress, yet Xuefeng chose the most difficult method of doing so. However, they had no say in the matter. The Crimson Dragon flying ship belonged to Zero Wing, and Xuefeng had absolute authority over this operation. Let's see if he can continue his willful act once his plan fails, Crimson Witch said, clicking her tongue. Even as she said that, she couldn't help but gaze at the ship in envy. If she had such a flying ship, she could even trample on peerless monsters. While the distant adventurer team hesitated on what they should do, and the Silver Lion Legion gradually moved into formation, one of the Crimson Dragon flying ship's mana pulse cannons began to gather energy. The ship's bronze engine powered the mana pulse cannons, and the instant the cannon began to absorb the ambient mana, even players within 1,000 yards sensed the mana around them go berserk. Before the Legion had even finished forming its defensive line around the flying ship, a black-white beam of light shot from the cannon, slamming into the Starlight Fortress's west wall. Boom! The wall exploded, and the intense shockwave rocked every player within several hundred yards of the fortress. The mana pulse cannon's might was utterly incomprehensible. Once the dust settled, it revealed a massive crack in the west wall, and the Great Lord-ranked elemental guards on the wall had lost more than one-third of their HPs from the attack. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. EU, how is that mana pulse cannon so powerful? Crimson Witch gaped in shock. She had seen mana pulse cannons before, but they had never been powerful enough to devour one-third of a level 100+ Great Lord's HP. Before anyone could recover from the shock, the Crimson Dragon flying ship's 11 other mana pulse cannons began to charge. After a moment, 11 black-white beams bombarded the Starlight Fortress's west wall. Chapter 2454, Domain Class. When the 11 mana pulse cannons bombarded the Starlight Fortress's west wall, everyone in the vicinity felt as if Armageddon had begun as the world around them trembled. Destruction. Shock. Helplessness. Everyone gaped as they watched the beam attacks destroy the west wall, tearing space as they passed. Isn't this flying ship a little too strong? Crimson Witch wondered. Not only was the Crimson Dragon flying ship's mana pulse cannon extraordinarily powerful, but the ship also had 12 of them in total. It was practically a flying fortress. Inwardly, she was relieved that she hadn't started an all-out battle against Xueqi's group by the demonic silver mine. If a battle had truly started, none of her legion would have left the mine alive, even if they had used their Tier 4 hero summoning scroll. Crimson Witch and the other Silver Lion Legion members weren't the only ones shocked. The adventurer team fighting not far from the Starlight Fortress's front gate was also stunned. A single shot from those mana pulse cannons had dealt a devastating blow across a 50-yard radius area. If all 12 mana pulse cannons fired together, one round would be enough to annihilate a 5,000-man team, much less their 500 team members. Who are those people? Aside from shock and fear, the adventurer team's members were overcome with curiosity about the identity of Xueqi's group. They were members of the Stormheart Adventurer Team, a top adventurer team that had survived multiple large-scale battles with demonic creatures. Stormheart was quite famous in the Golden Sands Kingdom and its several neighboring kingdoms. Once, a superpower had even approached them for help to capture a demonic creature town. Of all of the opponents Stormheart had faced before, however, none could hold a candle to the Crimson Dragon flying ship. Not even the various superpowers had such a powerful weapon. Could those players be trying to capture the Starlight Fortress? The ruthless man muttered incredulously as he watched the flying ship hover in the sky. Star Valley was a forbidden land, and its fortresses were considered forbidden lands within a forbidden land. Current players simply didn't have the strength to venture to such places. On average, the monsters within these fortresses were level 110 plus, and there were usually easily more than 200,000 of them. The fortresses were even home to level 110 plus mythic monsters. For these mythic monsters, killing current Tier 3 experts would be child's play. Even now, the various superpowers were only capable of exploring the areas around Star Valley's fortresses. They'd have to wait until they had several thousand Tier 3 players to have even a chance of capturing a fortress. The monsters weren't even the most difficult part about capturing Star Valley's fortresses. Opening a hole in the fortress's defenses was the true challenge. If a team failed to do so, they'd never be able to send players into the fortress, making it impossible to kill the Guardian boss and secure the fortress token. That seems to be the case. Why else would they attack the Starlight Fortress directly? Stormheart's commander replied, similarly watching the flying ship with fear and awe. He had assumed that Xueqi's group had simply come to grind in the area and had only revealed the Crimson Dragon flying ship to scare away their adventurer team. He had never thought that those players actually intended to capture the fortress, which not even the various superpowers dared to try. Before everyone could overcome their shock over watching the mana pulse cannon's bombardment, the brilliant light enveloping the Starlight Fortress began to fade, revealing massive cracks in the wall. The Great Lord-ranked elemental guards stationed on the wall had also been obliterated. What power! One round of attacks was enough to cause so much damage? McCaffrey couldn't help his growing excitement when he saw the cracks. He had assumed that the power of one flying ship wouldn't be enough to destroy the Starlight Fortress's wall quickly, and if he had been right, their chances of capturing the fortress would have been dismal. They wouldn't have had enough time to clear out the fortress's monsters and find the Guardian boss before the wall repaired itself. However, it seemed that he had been wrong, and they actually had a high chance of success. Although he didn't know how much durability the West Wall had lost, he had enough experience in sieging demonic creature cities and fortresses to know what kind of power it took to crack one of those walls. Based on his experiences, he calculated that the Starlight Fortress's wall had lost at least 2% of its durability, which meant the wall would fall after 50 rounds of attacks. A fortress normally needed around 2 days to repair a destroyed wall. If they could destroy the wall with 50 rounds of attacks, not only would they have enough time to clear out the fortress's monsters, but they'd also have enough time to kill the Guardian boss multiple times over. Zero Wings members aboard the Crimson Dragon flying ship, however, had a different opinion. Guild leader, this fortress's wall is formidable. One round of our attacks was only enough to crack it. It's practically as solid as the walls around major NPC cities, Aqua Rose said, astonished when she saw how little damage the West Wall had taken. She was very familiar with the power of the Crimson Dragon flying ship's mana pulse cannons. Every one of their attacks was at the Tier 4 standard, even stronger than ordinary mythic monsters' attacks. One blast was enough to deal significant damage to a guild city's walls. And yet, the wall around the Starlight Fortress had barely taken any damage after 12 mana pulse cannons had fired. The wall was almost as tough as the wall around White River City. White River City had already been promoted multiple times. Even if mythic monsters attacked, the city wouldn't take any damage. They'd likely have to attack for a long time to open a hole in the Starlight Fortress's wall. Every time they fired the mana pulse cannons, it cost them money. Although the cannons weren't as expensive as the mana pulse cannons in guild towns and cities, each shot still cost 100 magic crystals. I'm satisfied with this outcome. If the fortress activates its defensive magic array and reinforces the wall, we won't break through even after 2 solid days of attacking, Xueqi said, chuckling and shaking his head. The Starlight Fortress had survived since ancient times, standing even after numerous battles. How could an advanced flying ship possibly destroy it that easily? If the Starlight Fortress were so fragile, it wouldn't have lasted this long. He didn't particularly mind the magic crystals they spent. He had plenty to spare. If he had needed magic crystals so badly, he wouldn't have tried to capture a fortress in the first place. While Xueqi and his party waited for the mana pulse cannon's cooldowns to end, they heard a deafening roar from within the Starlight Fortress. Even from several thousand yards away, they could hear it clearly. The Starlight Fortress's gate then opened, and swarms of elemental creatures flooded out. Flying elemental creatures launched themselves from the fortress. At a glance, there were easily over 50,000 monsters, and every one of them charged at the Silver Lion Legion and the Crimson Dragon flying ship. Why are there so many? McCaffrey felt his scalp tingle as he watched the incoming swarm. Even in the worst-case scenario, there should have only been 10,000 or so monsters spilling out of the fortress, according to his initial estimates. But more than 50,000 charged toward them, including more than 100 Grand Lords. The Grand Lords alone outnumbered the Silver Lion Legion's Tier 3 experts. Before McCaffrey could issue a command, however, a 30-meter-tall Starlight Behemoth flew from the fortress. The instant the Starlight Behemoth emerged, the ambient mana seemed to submit to its control. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, what? A domain-class mythic. Crimson Witch exclaimed, paling when she saw the flying monster. Expert players like her were no longer strangers to the concept of domains. Almost all Tier 4 NPCs had one, and while within their domains, NPCs could move and fight in a world that was tailored to them. This was why Tier 4 NPCs were so powerful. Tier 3 NPCs couldn't defeat such a being, even with a numerical advantage. Fortunately, monsters were dumb, unlike NPCs. They relied on their physical prowess in battle, but even so, they could contend with NPCs of the same tier. Monsters that had reached the Tier 4 mythic standard were particularly hardy, powerful enough that even Tier 4 NPCs of the same level would struggle to defeat them. Domain-class mythic monsters had their own domain. Even Tier 4 NPCs would have to flee from a group of domain-class mythics. She had never dreamed that such a powerful monster would dwell within the Starlight Fortress, and it had just flown out of the fortress to greet them. Chapter 2455. World Descends. I thought only mobs were supposed to come out. Why is the fortress's guardian boss out here too? Why is this guardian boss so powerful? Shouldn't domain-class mythics be world bosses? The Starlight Behemoth's appearance shocked the Silver Lion Legion. The joy they had felt after seeing the Crimson Dragon flying ships might vanished when they saw the Starlight Behemoth's gigantic, translucent body. Now, only fear swam within them. Thus far, the various superpowers had only discovered a handful of domain-class mythic monsters, and every one of them was on par with a natural disaster. Those monsters could even guard an entire map. In fact, some level 90+ world bosses were merely domain-class mythics, and the various superpowers forces had proven ineffective against them. Even after relying on special items, they had been annihilated. A domain was simply unstoppable. This was why Tier 3 NPCs were no match for their Tier 4 counterparts, even when they outnumbered the stronger NPCs. Within another's domain, one's overall performance would suffer significantly. Just casting spells and activating skills became excruciatingly difficult within a hostile domain. One would be fortunate to exhibit 50% of their normal combat power in such a fight. To make matters worse, the domain would strengthen its users' overall performance, as well. Even in a fight between a Tier 3 NPC and a Tier 4 NPC of equal strength, the difference would be qualitative with a domain active. Needless to say, the difference would be even greater between Tier 3 players and a domain class mythic. Commander, we need to retreat. Nobody can stop that domain class mythic boss. If we don't run now, it'll slaughter us. The ruthless man from Stormheart shouted at his commander, Crow, when he saw the Starlight Behemoth. Not only was the Starlight Behemoth individually powerful, but its domain would also strengthen the army of 50,000 monsters. Such a force would have no issues taking down a guild city, much less the Silver Lion Legion's 8,000 members. With the fortress's elemental creatures focused on the Crimson Dragon flying ship, they had a chance to escape. If they waited until these monsters destroyed the ship and massacred the Legion, they'd be next. It seems our raid is impossible. Inform everyone to retreat. Crow commanded as he gazed at the Starlight Behemoth. He had wanted to linger to witness the historical moment the Starlight Fortress was captured, but that no longer seemed like a wise idea. Of the various superpowers he knew of, none could even defeat a level 90+ domain class, mythic-ranked world boss, not even the 5 great super guilds. Meanwhile, the Starlight Behemoth was a level 113 domain class mythic boss. Starlight Behemoth, Toriand. Realm Lord L, Starlight Creature, Mythic. Level 113 HP 4, 000, 000, 000, 000/4, 000, 000. Aside from the Starlight Behemoth's basic attributes, its 4 billion HP alone would be enough to inspire despair. With 4 billion HP, the Starlight Behemoth would regain 40 million HP every 5 seconds with its battle recovery. If players couldn't deal 8 million damage each second, their attacks would be utterly worthless against the monster. Tier 2 experts had a hard time dealing more than -10,000 damage to a level 100+ mythic monster, and their attacks would be even less effective against a domain class mythic. Only Tier 3 players could deal more than -10,000 damage to such a monster. Assuming that a Tier 3 player could deal -20,000 DPS to the Starlight Behemoth, a team would need over 400 Tier 3 players to overcome the Guardian boss's battle recovery. Where was a power supposed to find 400 Tier 3 players at this stage of the game? Not even the Crimson Dragon flying ship would make much of a difference. Flying ships were war weapons. They might be useful against dumb mobs, but against a mythic monster that could fly, the ship would even struggle to land a hit. Furthermore, the Crimson Dragon flying ship's mana pulse cannons had very long cooldowns. To put it simply, it would only be limitedly effective against a domain-class mythic boss. While the Stormheart adventurer team fled, panic overwhelmed the Silver Lion Legion as they watched the Starlight Behemoth fly toward them. The Starlight Behemoth is too fast, Vice Commander. We won't have enough time to get everyone out of here safely. We'll have to leave some players behind to slow it down. Please, issue the command, Crimson Witch begged McCaffrey as she watched the Guardian boss approach. None of them had expected the Starlight Fortress to house a domain-class mythic. Xueqi had doomed them all. Since the situation had already become desperate, the only thing they could do now was figure out a way to reduce the Legion's losses as much as possible. The Silver Lion Legion was Divine Tribe's strongest force. If it were annihilated, the guild would suffer. It seems we have no choice. Hearing Crimson Witch's pleas, McCaffrey reluctantly pulled the Tier 4 hero summoning scroll from his bag. Current Tier 3 players had no hope of stopping a level 113 domain-class mythic. If none of them could stop the Starlight Behemoth, the Silver Lion Legion would be slaughtered. He had no choice but to rely on the Tier 4 hero to pin the Guardian boss down, buying enough time for everyone to escape. It might be possible to rely on the Tier 4 hero to raid the Starlight Behemoth if it were alone, but it wasn't. Not only did the Guardian boss have the support of 50,000 monsters, but its domain even strengthened the monsters around it. Not even 4 Tier 4 heroes could defeat this horde. While McCaffrey prepared to use the Tier 4 hero summoning scroll, Xueqi walked onto the flying ship's deck and quietly watched the Starlight Behemoth's army. Crap! He's not even going to run. Does he assume he can use his flying ship to get away? Maybe he's in denial. He was clearly hoping to capture the Starlight Fortress, but now that there's a domain-class mythic, his hopes have been dashed. The Silver Lion Legion's Tier 3 experts, who were panicking on the ground, were confused when they saw Xueqi on the Crimson Dragon flying ship's deck, appearing relaxed. The ship could fly in quickly, but its speed was nothing compared to the domain-class mythics. Once the flying ship, which relied on mana to remain in the air, was within the Starlight Behemoth's domain, its movement speed would plummet. If Xuefeng turned the flying ship around and fled now, he'd have a chance of getting out of there alive, but if he waited until the ship got caught in the Guardian Boss's domain, neither he nor his ship would escape. However, while the Silver Lion Legion's members wondered if the sudden development had dealt too much of a mental blow for Xuefeng to handle, the swordsman pulled a golden ring from his bag. He raised the golden ring and began to chant an incantation. When Xuefeng finished the chant, he revealed a faint smile as he glanced at the Starlight Behemoth's approaching mana field. He then sacrificed 5,000 magic crystals to the Ring of Gospel and activated Miniature World. The sky began to tremble as the phantom of a new world appeared above them all, separating the sky from the land. Everyone immediately sensed that their connection to the outside world had been severed, and a frightening pressure overwhelmed them. This pressure didn't originate from a single point, but assaulted them from all directions. They all felt as if they had just been plunged into a hostile plane of existence. As Miniature World activated, the Starlight Behemoth's mana field began to visibly recede. The mana that had previously submitted to the Guardian Boss began to rebel. Rather than strengthen the Starlight Behemoth, it began to suppress the Realm Lord. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. EU. The Starlight Behemoth's basic attributes decreased rapidly. 5%, 7%, 10%. In just 3 short seconds, the Guardian Boss's basic attributes had been reduced by 20%. As for the elemental creatures following it, not only had they lost 30% of their attributes, but their movement speeds and reaction speeds had also significantly decreased. Impossible! He shattered a mythic-ranked Realm Lord's domain. Crimson Witch exclaimed, her jaw hanging open as she watched the Starlight Behemoth's mana field vanish completely. Chapter 2456. Flying Ship vs. Starlight Behemoth. He destroyed the boss's domain and suppressed it? What did he do? Crimson Witch wasn't the only player shocked to watch the Starlight Behemoth's domain shatter. No one could believe their eyes. They had never thought that Xuefeng had such an ability. Current players were no match for a Tier 4 being's domain. Some superpowers had tried to use Tier 4 domain scrolls against true Tier 4 domains, but they had barely been a match for the beings they had fought. Some Tier 4 domain scrolls were even weaker, and the superpowers that had relied on them had been suppressed by their enemy's domain. In contrast, not only had Xuefeng shattered the Starlight Behemoth's domain, but he had also suppressed the Guardian Boss. It was unbelievable. When Miniature World activated, the Starlight Behemoth paused for a moment mid-flight. However, it then bellowed angrily, and its entire body began to radiate dazzling starlight. It was trying to expand its domain again and break free from Miniature World. Unfortunately, no matter how much the Starlight Behemoth struggled, it couldn't escape the skill's effect. Mana control even has such a huge effect on magical items? Miniature World's results even stunned Xuefeng. He hadn't actually expected the Ring of Gospel's skill to suppress a Realm Lord to such an extent. All tools were ineffective against world bosses. Players had to rely on their own power. However, the Starlight Behemoth was not a world boss, and thus, tools could be used against it. This was certainly a benefit since players couldn't use Berserk skills in Star Valley. He had used Miniature World to suppress other mythic monsters, but until he had gained his mana body, he hadn't been able to use the mana concentrated within the Ring of Gospel. Now that he was a master magician as well, he, more or less, understood how the Ring of Gospel's magic arrays operated. He could now guide some of the concentrated mana into those arrays. Even so, he had never thought that the results would be this powerful. His only aim had been to destroy the Starlight Behemoth's domain. He hadn't dared to hope that Miniature World would suppress the Guardian Boss, as well. The Ring of Gospel proved far more effective than when he had used it blindly before. Of course, after giving the matter some thought, Xuefeng found it reasonable. He had already upgraded the Ring of Gospel to the fragmented legendary rank, and world power was already stronger than domains. Now that he could use some of Miniature World's true power, even if it were only a fraction, a Tier 4 domain was no match for him. Not even the Starlight Behemoth could resist this power, and could only watch as the ability suppressed its basic attributes. After this discovery, Xuefeng snapped back to the battle and glanced down at McCaffrey below the flying ship. Vice Commander Affray, prepare to greet the enemy. Try to slow those mobs down as much as possible, especially the monsters that can fly. I'll deal with the boss, Xuefeng shouted. McCaffrey could not help but hesitate as he turned back to the elemental creature's army. Disregarding the horde of Lord-ranked monsters, The army had over 100 level 110 plus Grand Lords. Even without the Starlight Behemoth's domain strengthening these elemental creatures, stopping so many high-level Grand Lords would be very difficult for the Silver Lion Legion's 8,000 members. Only Tier 3 players could tank those monsters, and the Legion only had 60 Tier 3 players. Before McCaffrey could say more, however, Xueqi sacrificed more magic crystals to the Ring of Gospel and activated Ring of Brilliance. Suddenly, everyone within a 2,000-yard radius felt a pleasant, empowering sensation spread through them. Their basic attributes and physiques improved by 20%, increasing their overall strength by a large margin. He has a strengthening domain tool, too? Crimson Witch was flabbergasted when she noticed the buffs the Silver Lion Legion had received. She found it simply unbelievable that Xueqi had both a suppressing domain tool and a strengthening domain tool. Normally, superpowers would be fortunate to have just one of these tools. Yet Xueqi had both. Will that help? Xueqi asked. Not even Xueqi had a good solution for facing the 50,000-strong army of elemental creatures, and he still had an agreement with Divine Tribe that the Silver Lion Legion could retreat if they lost more than 30% of their manpower. However, if McCaffrey realized that they had no hope of winning this battle, he would give up before that, which wasn't the outcome Xueqi wished to see. I can't make any guarantees, but we'll try our best to stop those mobs, McCaffrey agreed. Feeling the Ring of Brilliance's effects, he decided to grit his teeth and fight. If the Silver Lion Legion retreated without putting up a fight after Xueqi had gone to such lengths to help them succeed, both the Legion and Divine Tribe would be humiliated. Even if he had to risk severe losses, he would try his best to stop the approaching elemental creature army. Good. I'll leave the rest to you. Just leave that guardian boss to us. Xueqi was satisfied once he saw that McCaffrey was committed to this battle. He was already fortunate that the Silver Lion Legion, one of Divine Tribe's trump card legions, was willing to help. Xueqi then piloted his Crimson Dragon flying ship straight toward the Starlight Behemoth. What? Do they really intend to challenge the Starlight Behemoth? Everyone was dumbfounded as they watched the ship approach the Realm Lord. In the air, a flying ship had superb combat power, but that was only true against immobile objects and players. Flying ships weren't built to fight monsters. And yet, Xueqi's group was going to use the flying ship against the domain-class mythic. They had gone insane. Even stripped of its domain and with 20% less basic attributes, the Starlight Behemoth was far stronger than ordinary mythic monsters. Its 3.2 billion HP was more than enough to cause despair. While the Silver Lion Legion members considered the ship's odds of surviving, Aqua Rose raised her staff from the Crimson Dragon flying ship's deck and began to chant an incantation. Dark blue, twofold magic arrays began to appear around the Starlight Behemoth, one after another. Tier 3 Super Spell. Sea God's Grasp. Under her command, shackles of water closed around the Realm Lord, binding the Starlight Behemoth and holding it in place. Good. Fire the main cannon. Xueqi commanded. As soon as he did, the Crimson Dragon flying ship's magic elven cannon began to gather an astonishing amount of ambient mana. It then fired a searing hot white beam, with a 200-yard radius, at the Guardian boss's head. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. EU boom. As the shot collided with the Starlight Behemoth's face, the forest below shook violently. The Silver Lion Legion's members almost lost their footing due to the shockwaves, even from several hundred yards away. As the white beam's light faded, it revealed a colossal crater in the previously dense forest. Flowers, grass, trees, even the elemental creatures that had been in that area left no trace of their presence, utterly obliterated. After a short moment, a gigantic figure fell from the sky and crashed into the crater's center, causing such an impact that it sent dirt and debris into the air. That gigantic figure was none other than the immobilized Starlight Behemoth. Chapter 2457. The Behemoth Falls. How is that possible? The flying ship injured the boss with just one attack? How powerful is that thing? Are flying ships really this strong? Both the Silver Lion Legion and the fleeing Stormheart team fell silent as they stared at the fallen Starlight Behemoth. They had no idea of how to express the shock they felt. Ordinary mythic monsters couldn't compare to a mythic-ranked Realm Lord, even after the Starlight Behemoth had lost its domain. Its defense should be particularly high. Tier 2 players might deal around -5,000 damage to an ordinary mythic, but when they attacked a Realm Lord like the Starlight Behemoth, they'd only deal around -3,000 damage. Exceeding a monster like the Starlight Behemoth's damage tolerance to injure it would be absolutely impossible for current players. Yet the Crimson Dragon flying ship had accomplished the feat. When Xueqi saw the guardian boss on the ground, however, he wasn't surprised. On the contrary, he had expected this outcome. The magic elven cannon dealt peak Tier 4 divine damage. The cannon's power was nearly at the Tier 5 standard. Although the Starlight Behemoth was a realm lord, it was not a higher life form. Its life rating was roughly the same as ordinary mythic monsters. It was merely tougher. Compared to the mutated Sunset King Xueqi had encountered in the Sea God's realm, the Starlight Behemoth was an infant. If the magic elven cannon could even deal significant damage to the Sunset King, what chance did the Starlight Behemoth possibly have against it? Bombard it with ranged attacks. Xueqi shouted, gesturing to the heavily injured realm lord. Not only would God's domain's monsters lose a significant amount of their combat power when heavily injured, but their defense would decrease as well. A level 100+ mythic monster had incredible recovery speed, and if they didn't take advantage of this opportunity, they'd have to wait another 5 minutes before they could fire the magic elven cannon again. Roar! Before Xueqi and his entourage could attack the guardian boss, however, it released a deafening roar, which was so powerful that it stirred up a storm around the monster. The Starlight Behemoth then stretched open his massive maw, gathering a horrifying amount of mana within. Tier 4 spell, Starlight Roar. A brilliant beam of starlight shot from the Starlight Behemoth's mouth, and as it did, it shattered space around it. The attack was so fast that the Crimson Dragon flying ship didn't have time to dodge. The blood drained from everyone's faces. That beam attack had even more power than the flying ship's mana pulse cannons. It would annihilate any Tier 3 player it struck. Magic Shield, activate. Taking no risks, Xueqi activated the Crimson Dragon flying ship's magic shield immediately. Boom! When the beam collided with the magic shield, it transformed space around the ship into a sea of fire as another thunderous boom echoed throughout the area. As everyone expected to see the flying ship severely damaged, the flames died down, and the flying ship remained in one piece. However, cracks had formed along the barrier around it. As expected of a realm lord, it devoured over 20 million points from the shield's energy reserved with one attack. Xueqi was astounded when he saw that nearly half of the magic shield's energy was gone. The Crimson Dragon flying ship had upper-rank Tier 3 defense, which was even higher than most mythic monsters, yet it had taken over -20 million damage. The Starlight Roar clearly had the power to approach the Tier 4 upper rank. The attack would even shatter a minor NPC city's defensive magic array. After its attack, the Starlight Behemoth flapped its wings and flew toward the Crimson Dragon flying ship. It intended to down the ship before it did anything else. The flying ship was, after all, a long-distance war weapon and, as such, was weak against close combat attacks. Xueqi, however, had no intention of letting the Realm Lord get close to his flying ship. Before the Starlight Behemoth had even ascended, he had driven the ship toward the rear of the Silver Lion Legion. Since the Starlight Behemoth was so injured, the Crimson Dragon flying ship easily outran it. The Starlight Behemoth's speed has decreased? McCaffrey's eyes glowed as he watched the flying ship kite the Guardian boss around the Silver Lion Legion. McCaffrey had been relatively surprised to see the Crimson Dragon flying ship injure the Starlight Behemoth, but injuring a Guardian boss and killing it were two different things. The Starlight Behemoth might look miserable, but it hadn't lost a significant amount of HP. The magic elven cannon had only dealt a little over -50 million damage, which was nothing to the Starlight Behemoth. The Realm Lord would tear the Crimson Dragon flying ship to shreds long before they could kill it. It had an incredible recovery rate, after all. The flying ship, on the other hand, was a war weapon, and as such, it didn't have an automatic recovery ability. Every point of durability it lost in this battle would be permanent until repairs could be made. If the ship could kite the Starlight Behemoth, however, it would be a different story. As long as Xueqi's group kept the Guardian boss distracted, the Legion could spare some of its Tier 3 experts to help attack the Starlight Behemoth once it had finished off enough of the elemental creature army, slowly whittling the Realm Lord to death. But before McCaffrey could finish his thought, the Crimson Dragon flying ship stopped moving. What is he trying to do? Does he still plan to face the Starlight Behemoth head-on? The Silver Lion Legion's members were confused when they saw the ship come to a halt. They couldn't fathom what Xueqi was trying to do. Since the Crimson Dragon flying ship was currently faster than the Starlight Behemoth, it had the opportunity to increase the distance between it and the Guardian boss, buying time until the magic elven cannon's cooldown had ended. However, Xueqi instead chose to let the mythic monster catch up. The swordsman was clearly mad. With how fast the Starlight Behemoth's recovery rate was, its injuries would heal completely in a matter of minutes. While the Starlight Behemoth grew closer, and the Silver Lion Legion grew more nervous, Xueqi revealed the Bible of Darkness and activated demon summoning. A colossal pair of doors suddenly appeared before the flying ship, and as they parted, dense dark energy flooded through, transforming a 100-yard radius into a bubble of darkness. Once the doors were fully open, an 8-meter-tall one-horned demon flew through them. It wore a suit of pitched black armor and was supported by 2 pairs of leathery, dark black wings. The instant this one-horned demon emerged, every member of the Silver Lion Legion shuddered. A level 125. Tier 4 Great Demon? Why has a Great Demon come here? We're doomed. There are actually 2 Tier 4 monsters. This wasn't the first time they had seen a Tier 4 Great Demon, but the one before them was a level 125 Great Demon. Every 5 levels was a turning point in God's domain, and the difference was especially prominent after level 100. At most, the Silver Lion Legion could deal with level 110 monsters. If they tried to take down a level 125 Great Demon, they'd be digging their own graves. A level 125 Great Demon was even more frightening than the level 113 Starlight Behemoth. As they all began to plan their funerals, Xueqi pointed at the Starlight Behemoth, shouting at the one-horned demon, "Go! Kill it!" "Yes, my lord." The one-horned demon spoke in the human tongue before lightly bowing to Xueqi. Suddenly, the one-horned demon vanished, and by the time everyone noticed it again, it hovered within 200 yards of the Realm Lord. Tier 4 Spell. Advanced Instantaneous Movement. Once the Great Demon was within range, it swung its shadow black, steel trident. A 3-fold magic array then appeared above the Starlight Behemoth's head. Tier 4 Spell. Dark Lightning. Boom, boom, boom. Black arcs of lightning descended from above, striking the heavily injured Realm Lord, and each pulled an agonized cry from the mythic monster. Each lightning strike also dealt over -10 million damage, and after suffering 9 consecutive attacks, the Starlight Behemoth had lost nearly 100 million HP. Everyone was stupefied. Just how many cards does he possess? Shock and confusion flashed in Crimson Witch's eyes as she watched Xueqi control the one-horned demon. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. EU. First, he had revealed the Crimson Dragon flying ship. Then, he showed off his ability to summon a level 125 Great Demon. Xueqi was practically a one-man army. The Stormheart Adventurer Team's members, who watched from a distance, could not help but gape at the scene. This was the first time they had ever seen anyone beat a level 100+ Realm Lord into submission. The level 125 Great Demon continued to tank the Starlight Behemoth, while the Crimson Dragon flying ship bombarded the Realm Lord with attacks, rapidly depleting its HP. Although the Starlight Behemoth tried to use a variety of skills to retaliate, it only dealt a little damage to the one-horned demon. Compared to how quickly the Starlight Behemoth's HP drained, the amount of HP the Great Demon lost was nothing. In less than 10 minutes, before the Silver Lion Legion could even kill one Grand Lord, the Starlight Behemoth, one of the Starlight Fortress's guardian bosses, fell. Chapter 2458. Unexpected loot. When the gigantic Starlight Behemoth crashed into the ground, the Silver Lion Legion members watched their experience bars rapidly fill. Each of them had earned even more EXP than when they normally slew level 100+ mythic monsters as 100-man teams. Some players even leveled up, reaching level 106. It's dead. For a moment, the Silver Lion Legion's members, who were in the middle of their battle with the elemental creature army, were stunned after the Starlight Behemoth had hit the ground. None of them had expected a level 113 domain-class mythic-ranked Realm Lord to go down so easily. For a moment, they even wondered if the Starlight Behemoth had actually been a level 110 Grand Lord. However, the Silver Lion Legion members were all experts, and they knew that weakness wasn't the reason the fight with the Starlight Behemoth had gone so smoothly. Rather, Xueqi's group was just that ridiculously strong. Meanwhile, the Starlight Behemoth began to disintegrate into countless particles of light, and a moment later, streaks of golden light escaped the Realm Lord's fading corpse, scattering around it. Upon landing on the ground, those streaks of light transformed into dazzling items that radiated dense mana. Some even gathered the ambient mana around them. In the blink of an eye, the The site of the Starlight Behemoth's fall had transformed into a high mana density area. Crap! Isn't the boss's loot a little too abundant? A mythic-ranked Realm Lord really is amazing. The loot from the level 100 plus mythics we've killed in the past doesn't even come close. Its loot has even increased the mana density in the surrounding area. The Silver Lion Legion members' eyes nearly fell from their sockets as they gazed at the Guardian boss's loot. They had seen level 100 plus mythic bosses' loot before. They had even seen world bosses' loot, but they had never seen a phenomenon like this. Even though they couldn't appraise the items right now, they had a rough estimation of the loot's value based on the mana the items radiated. The items that pulled mana to themselves in particular should be epic rank at the very least. There was no way those items could be dark gold rank. Level 100 plus epic items. The Silver Lion Legion had killed multiple level 100 plus mythic monsters just to acquire one level 100 plus epic item. However, not only had the Starlight Behemoth dropped such items, but it had also dropped over 24 items that radiated dense mana. Based on their experiences, those 24 items were likely dark gold rank. To equip level 110 dark gold items was akin to equipping level 100 plus epic items to players like them, who hadn't yet reached level 110. Although level reduction gemstones that they could use with level 100 plus weapons and equipment were rare and costly, the cost was negligible compared to equipping level 110 dark gold weapons and equipment now. If a tier 3 player could fully gear themselves in level 110 dark gold equipment while at level 105, they'd even be able to tank level 110 mythic monsters, not to mention level 110 grandlords. McCaffrey and Divine Tribe's other upper echelons couldn't help the envy they felt. Divine Tribe hadn't obtained a single piece of level 110 dark gold equipment yet. It didn't even have much level 105 dark gold equipment. And as for level 100 plus epic weapons and equipment, the guild had almost nothing. Unfortunately, Divine Tribe and Zero Wing had agreed that a monster's loot would go to whichever team was responsible for slaying it. If both sides contributed to a monster's death, they would distribute the dropped items based on their contributions in the fight. For a moment, McCaffrey regretted his decision to save the Tier 4 hero summoning scroll. He had never expected the Starlight Behemoth to drop so many precious items. If he had used the scroll, slaying the Starlight Behemoth wouldn't have been a problem. It had already been heavily injured, and if the guild could obtain a fraction of the Starlight Behemoth's loot, it would be worth the cost of using the Tier 4 hero summoning scroll. The Tier 4 hero could have also helped kill the rest of the fortress's mythic bosses, and the Silver Lion Legion would return with enough of a harvest to outstrip the value of a Tier 4 hero summoning scroll. However, Zero Wing would now monopolize the Realm Lord's loot, while Divine Tribe could only watch, envious. Everyone, work harder. You can see how much loot that boss dropped. There are still several more Guardian bosses in the Starlight Fortress. If we can kill them, I'll hold an internal auction for all of the weapons and equipment we earn. Everyone will have a chance to obtain top-tier weapons and equipment. McCaffrey shouted in the team chat. Whether or not you can take advantage of this opportunity depends on your performance now. McCaffrey's announcement ignited the Silver Lion Legion members' fighting spirit. Internal auctions rarely occurred among Divine Tribe's expert teams, especially among the guild's trump card legions and teams. The guild usually only distributed monsters' loot among specific players, and only a small portion was available for the core members, in exchange for GCPs, in the guild warehouse. McCaffrey's decision to hold an internal auction for the loot they obtained on this mission was a huge opportunity for all of them. Without the guild's interference, they wouldn't have to worry about missing their chance to contest for the best available weapons and equipment. Moreover, only a small number of players participated in this operation, which increased their chances of securing top-tier weapons and equipment. Even if the guild upper echelons on the team participated, they only had a little more GCPs than the rest of the Legion. With so many items up for grabs, these upper echelons would only win a small fraction of the loot. With their fighting spirit reaching unprecedented highs, the Silver Lion Legion stopped holding back as they desperately fought the monster army charging at them. McCaffrey even used the Tier 4 hero summoning scroll to help clear out the mobs. Seeing this astonished Xueqi a little. He had never considered that the Starlight Behemoth's loot would motivate the Legion to such an extent. He didn't give the matter much thought, however. The harder the Silver Lion Legion worked, the faster they could clear out the fortress's mobs. If Zero Wing's 10 members had to take on the task alone, it would take ages to clear out the entire fortress. Aqua, I'm giving you command while I tidy up the loot, Xueqi said before he leaped off the Crimson Dragon flying ship. Although he doubted that the Silver Lion Legion's members would try to steal his loot, the Starlight Behemoth had dropped extraordinary items. The sooner he secured those items, the better. Not only was the Starlight Behemoth a domain-class mythic-ranked realm lord, but such mythic bosses were also quite rare in God's domain. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After Xueqi disembarked the ship, Aqua Rose and her comrades continued to bombard the Starlight Fortress's west wall. Xueqi wore an astonished expression by the time he had finished collecting the Starlight Behemoth's loot and appraised the first item. The Starlight Fortress Lord's token? Confused, Xueqi stared at the dark gold token in his palm. Before he could figure out what was going on, he heard the sound of a system notification. Star Valley Region System Announcement. A player has successfully captured the Starlight Fortress. The guild this player belongs to will receive 20,000 guild reputation points. This player has become the Starlight Fortress's lord. The Starlight Fortress will automatically open to the public in 3 days. Players may enter and rest within the fortress freely at that time. Chapter 2459. Western Continent shaken. The system announcement repeated throughout the Star Valley 3 times, and everyone in battle fell silent for a moment at the main god system's cold mechanical voice. What's going on? Someone captured the Starlight Fortress? The Silver Lion Legion members couldn't keep up with the sudden developments. They hadn't even made it through the walls or gate yet, so no one should have been able to capture the fortress. How could this have happened? It wasn't just the Legion's various experts who were confused. Even McCaffrey, the Legion's vice commander, was stunned. What happened to the Starlight Fortress? McCaffrey gazed at the fortress several thousand yards away, confounded. Did someone sneak in and slay the final Guardian boss? Even as McCaffrey wondered this, he tried to deny the possibility. In God's domain, players couldn't enter a sealed fortress until they destroyed the front gate or broke a hole in the walls. Since the Starlight Fortress's walls and gate were intact, how could any player get into the fortress? Even if players could accomplish the task, the fortress was still home to hundreds of thousands of elemental creatures. All of these monsters were level 110 or higher, and the weakest of them was Lord rank. Not even a 1,000-man, Tier 3 team would be able to handle the final Guardian boss in such a situation, much less a 100-man team of Tier 3 players. Even if players miraculously managed to reach and challenge the final Guardian boss, fighting the mythic-ranked boss should cause a huge commotion. But although they had been engaged in battle outside the fortress, they hadn't heard any noise from within. The only strange part about this siege was that over 50,000 monsters had emerged to attack, rather than the 10,000 they had expected. Moreover, this monster army had over 100 Grand Lords and a mythic boss, a creature that normally should remain within the fortress. Could it be? McCaffrey suddenly thought of a possibility, and he spun toward Xueqi, who was busy looting the Starlight Behemoth's loot near the rear line. In all of his experience sieging God's domain's fortresses, the final Guardian boss had never charged out of the fortress, yet the Starlight Behemoth had been extraordinarily powerful. As a mythic-ranked realm lord, the Starlight Behemoth could be considered on par with a world boss, albeit one of the weakest. Of course, a level 113 world boss was an absolute nightmare for current players. Not to mention, the Starlight Behemoth had the support of an army of 50,000 monsters. Defeating it was far more difficult than defeating an ordinary realm lord. If Xueqi hadn't used Miniature World to suppress the Guardian boss's domain earlier, McCaffrey would have prepared to lose half of his legion at least. Meanwhile, Xueqi stood in the middle of the crater, holding a dark gold token. The token radiated dense mana and served as proof of their success in capturing the Starlight Fortress. The Starlight Fortress Lord's token. McCaffrey wasn't the only one to notice. Crimson Witch and the others had turned to look at Xueqi as well. They've captured the fortress, just like that? Crimson Witch stared at the token in Xueqi's hand with wide eyes. Although she knew that Xueqi's group had a high chance of capturing the Starlight Fortress, she had never thought he'd secure the Fortress Lord's token so soon. This was one of Star Valley's fortresses they were talking about. It was something the Western Continent's various superpowers dreamed of obtaining. And yet, Xueqi had captured the fortress so easily. If she told this story, not even fools would believe her. Every member of the Silver Lion Legion was stupefied. None of them had ever expected a fortress in a level 100+ forbidden land to be so easy to capture. If the continent's other superpowers found out about this, they'd likely faint with anger. In reality, even Xueqi was astonished. He hadn't expected to obtain the Starlight Fortress Lord's token so quickly either. He had even been prepared to use the Hero's Tome to summon a Tier 4 hero. If the first Guardian boss they had faced had already been a mythic-ranked Realm Lord, the final Guardian boss might be a superior mythic. Players like them wouldn't be able to deal with a level 110+ superior mythic easily. Only a Tier 4 hero would have a chance of defeating such a monster. This has saved us a lot of effort, but we have much less time to fortify the fortress now. Xueqi was not particularly pleased to see the Fortress Lord's token, and he gave it a bitter smile. The fact that he had obtained the Fortress Lord's token so soon was both a blessing and a curse. Now that he had secured the Fortress Lord's token, he would have full control of the Starlight Fortress's magic array. Although he still had to reach the fortress's core to activate the defensive magic array, it would no longer buff the monsters within now that he had the token. This would make capturing the fortress far easier. Now, he only needed to clear out the monsters in the Starlight Fortress, and he wouldn't have to destroy the fortress's wall or gate to do it. He could simply waltz through the front gate. The only problem was that he needed to clear out the monsters and strengthen the fortress's defenses within 3 days, before the fortress opened to the public, and players began to flood in. Without adequate defenses, managing the fortress would become troublesome, and the various superpowers might use the opportunity to take it from him. Unfortunately, sealing the fortress and preventing players from entering wasn't possible. The Starlight Fortress was in Star Valley, a forbidden land. God's domain's forbidden lands weren't controlled by any kingdom or empire, and almost all of their fortresses had survived since ancient times, created before the Great Destruction. Forbidden lands fortresses weren't like those in neutral maps or guild towns and cities. Even with the Fortress Lord's token, one would not gain full access to the fortress. They couldn't open or seal the fortresses as they wished. This was also the reason that any power to capture a fortress in a forbidden land was forced to send a large number of members to garrison the fortress. In truth, the main god system settings for this weren't unreasonable. Forbidden lands had far more abundant resources than other maps. If a power could acquire full control of an ancient fortress in a forbidden land, it would be nigh impossible for other powers to break through the defenses and take it from them due to the defensive mechanisms that had also survived since ancient times. The power that had first captured the fortress would have permanent access to the Forbidden Lands resources, while everyone else would have to watch from the sidelines. This certainly wasn't a fair situation. Take the Starlight Fortress, for example. It might only be a small fortress, but once its defensive magic array was activated, only Tier 5 beings would be able to break it. In an era where the gods had gone into seclusion, Tier 5 powerhouses stood at the peak of God's domain. Even emperors had to show proper respect. These powerhouses could wipe out entire kingdoms. Not even empires would get away scot-free after provoking such an individual. Xueqi had thought that he'd have 3 full days to bolster the Starlight Fortress's defenses after he captured it. But now he had to waste some of that time clearing out the hundreds of thousands of monsters within. While Xueqi and the others continued their fight against the Starlight Fortress's monsters, the Stormheart Adventurer team watched from a distance with dropped jaws. "Who are those people?" the ruthless greatsword-wielding man muttered as he stared at the system announcement in shock. "They've actually managed to capture the Starlight Fortress? We don't know who they are, but this will certainly cause an uproar across the continent," Crow, Stormheart's commander, said. He couldn't help but glance Xueqi's way. The various powers and expert teams all wanted to conquer Star Valley, but players couldn't remain in the area for very long, which slowed their exploration progress in the Forbidden Land. Although the various superpowers had frequently tried to capture fortresses within Star Valley, none had succeeded. Now that someone had, Crow didn't even want to imagine how this event would change Star Valley. While Stormheart's members discussed the matter amongst themselves, news of the Starlight Fortress's capture spread like wildfire throughout the western continent. Chapter 2460. Swarming Starlight Fortress, Silver Moon Empire, Silver Lion City. What did you say? Zero Wing has already captured the Starlight Fortress? Adolphe was momentarily stunned when he heard McCaffrey's report. Impossible. Your group only left a while ago. Even if you hadn't rested, how could you have slain several 100,000 monsters in the fortress so quickly? Adolphe felt as if McCaffrey were playing a joke on him. Zero Wing and the Silver Lion Legion hadn't even been gone from Silver Lion City for more than a day, and the Starlight Fortress was home to hundreds of thousands of monsters, the weakest of which was Lord rank. Furthermore, there were plenty of great lords and grand lords in the fortress, and multiple mythic-ranked guardian bosses. Even if the Starlight Fortress had opened its gate to the Silver Lion Legion, the Legion's 8,000 players would still need a lot of time to clear out all of the monsters. It'd be a miracle if the Legion finished the job within 2 or 3 days. However, less than a day had passed since the Legion had left for Star Valley, and including travel time, they had spent even less time in the area. Did McCaffrey assume he had gone senile with old age? It's true, Great Elder, McCaffrey insisted, smiling bitterly when he saw Adolph's skepticism. Take a look for yourself if you don't believe me. We've already entered the Starlight Fortress and are clearing out the monsters. The fortress magic array is now buffing us, rather than its previous residents. As McCaffrey spoke, he changed the video chat to display his view of the situation. Adolph's display then revealed the Silver Lion Legion's fight with the elemental creatures within the Starlight Fortress. Although the weakest of the elemental creatures were level 110 lords, and many of them were level 110 plus great lords and grand lords, the fortress's magic array suppressed every one of the monsters, drastically reducing their basic attributes and mobility. In addition, the Legion's members were surrounded by a faint purple glow, significantly enhancing their attributes and physiques. Although the Silver Lion Legion was badly outnumbered, the elemental creatures were no match for them, and the monsters continued to fall as the fight continued. Seeing this made it obvious that the Starlight Fortress was now under player control. Otherwise, the fortress's magic array wouldn't behave in such a way. How is this possible? Adolph stared with wide eyes. They were talking about one of Star Valley's fortresses. Even if several superpowers worked together, they still couldn't capture a fortress in this level 100+ forbidden land, much less Divine Tribe alone. Great Elder, I doubt it will be long before the other superpowers hear of this. The main god system had announced the Starlight Fortress's capture in a regional announcement. We couldn't keep this a secret if we wanted to, McCaffrey cautioned. He could sympathize with how Adolph felt at the moment. When Xueqi had first declared that he wanted to capture the Starlight Fortress, McCaffrey had assumed the swordsman was both insane and ignorant. The West's various superpowers had to expend a lot of resources and manpower to obtain a single town. Yet Xueqi wanted to capture a fortress in a level 100+ forbidden land. Clearly, he hadn't been taking the Western continent's superpowers seriously. Star Valley had leveling resources that were unique to the area. It was also home to the West's only 2 known God Mode regional dungeons. It was no exaggeration to claim that owning one of Star Valley's fortresses was on par with owning several Grade 1 veins. If the various superpowers were capable of capturing these fortresses, they would have already done so. How could a pseudo-superpower like Zero Wing possibly succeed where the various superpowers had failed? In the end, however, Xueqi had succeeded. Moreover, the strength Zero Wing had displayed was far beyond anything McCaffrey could have imagined. When it came to laying siege to fortified locations, Zero Wing outstripped ordinary superpowers. In fact, not even superguilds would prove as adept as Zero Wing in this respect. The domain tools and the Crimson Dragon flying ship Xueqi had revealed were godly tools during an offensive siege. Watching those tools in action had changed everything McCaffrey had thought he knew about siege battles. Before the Ring of Gospel and flying ship, Tier 3 experts were nothing. It seems I still underestimated Zero Wing. Not only can it travel between the continents, but it has even proven capable of capturing the Starlight Fortress. Not even superguilds have such firm foundations, Adolph said, taking a deep breath to calm himself. He also re-evaluated what he knew about the guild known as Zero Wing. Since that is the case, I want you to give everything you have in assisting Zero Wing from now on. Also, inform Black Flame that Divine Tribe is willing to go all out in helping his guild manage the Starlight Fortress. Not only will we send the Divine Hymn Legion and a 150,000-man expert army to garrison the fortress free of charge, but we'll also give Zero Wing 100 bottles of the special enchanted bloodline. In return, all Divine Tribe wants is a temporary residence in the Starlight Fortress. Adolph's declaration stunned McCaffrey. Do we really need to go that far, Great Elder? Setting aside the Divine Hymn Legion, we went to great lengths to save up 100 bottles of the special enchanted bloodline. If we give them all to Zero Wing, our guild's Tier 2 experts will have a much harder time reaching Tier 3 than other superpowers players. McCaffrey quickly tried to dissuade Adolph from his decision. The Divine Hymn Legion wasn't as strong as the Silver Lion Legion, but it was the guild's second strongest trump card legion. Normally, it was responsible for garrisoning the guild's important mining towns. If they transferred the Divine Hymn Legion to the Starlight Fortress, those mining towns' defenses would become a problem. The 100 special enchanted bloodlines were also supposed to be the capital divine tribe used to compete with the various super guilds. These bloodlines could help the guild quickly nurture Tier 3 experts. With another 100 Tier 3 experts, Divine Tribe could start raiding level 100 super large-scale team dungeons, instantly surpassing the various super guilds. Although Zero Wing had secured the Starlight Fortress, fortresses in Forbidden Lands weren't like those in other maps. Even after capturing them, players couldn't gain full control of these fortresses. Moreover, NPCs wouldn't be around to help manage the fortresses, and thus, they would require a large number of experts to protect them long-term. Otherwise, it wouldn't be long before the ruling power started having problems. Since news of the Starlight Fortress's capture had already begun to spread, many powers would swarm to it in the near future. Meanwhile, Zero Wing had barely any manpower on the Western continent. Without Divine Tribe's help, defending the Starlight Fortress was impossible for Zero Wing. There was simply no reason for Divine Tribe to give Zero Wing 100 bottles of the special enchanted bloodline. We have to. You should realize that if we want a temporary residence in Star Valley, Zero Wing is our only option for an ally. On the other hand, Zero Wing can choose from many superpowers to ally with. However, small fortresses can only have one temporary residence, and we have to have it, no matter what. Adolphe sternly informed his subordinate. The potential wealth and resources related to the Starlight Fortress couldn't be underestimated, especially the leveling resources. If Divine Tribe could secure a temporary residence in the Starlight Fortress, the guild's overall leveling speed would surpass the other superpowers by a large margin. 100 special enchanted bloodlines? Zero Wing really has lucked out. When Crimson Witch overheard Adolphe's statement in tone, she knew the Great Elder had already made up his mind. She wasn't happy about it, but there was nothing she could do to change it. A lot of superpowers will be paying attention to the fortress, and it still isn't guaranteed that Zero Wing can defend its ownership. Hopefully, Zero Wing doesn't act foolishly. While Divine Tribe discussed the matter, the West's various superpowers began to grow restless. Interesting. It seems someone has proven capable of capturing the Starlight Fortress. Which power is it? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Could it be a hidden superpower that has finally decided to spread its wings? Regardless, let's go take a look at the fortress. If this unknown power can't manage the fortress, this is the perfect opportunity to take it from them. The Western continent's various powers began to dispatch large expert teams, sending them to Star Valley. These teams only had one goal: take the Starlight Fortress. Chapter 2461, Fortress's Legacy. Star Valley, Starlight Fortress. Inside the dilapidated fortress full of level 110+ elemental creatures, the Silver Lion Legion continued to push toward the fortress's core. Although they faced more Great Lords and Grand Lords as they delved further into the fortress, defeating these monsters became an easy task with the Tier 4 hero McCaffrey had summoned and the fortress's magic array buff. After grinding in the fortress for just 6 hours, every member of the Legion discovered that their experience bars had grown considerably. Their leveling speed here was several times faster than grinding in normal maps. Furthermore, the elemental creatures dropped substantial loot, including plenty of level 110 mysterious iron equipment. If they were lucky, even level 110 secret silver equipment and set equipment would drop. The equipment was top tier to the Silver Lion Legion's members. The highest leveled players among them were level 106, while many of them were still stuck at level 105. Currently, obtaining level 110 weapons and equipment was a major challenge for them. Set equipment pieces' attributes were generally half a rank better than ordinary equipment of the same rank. If players could collect the full set, the set's attributes would be a full rank better than ordinary equipment of the same rank, with some having even greater bonuses. Take the level 110 secret silver set equipment the Starlight Fortress's monsters dropped, for example. Although the hidden blue set was only a level 110 secret silver set equipment, not only would having 6 of the 8 pieces increase a player's casting speed by 20%, but it would also increase their spell's effects by 25%. With all 8 pieces of the set, it would increase one's spell completion rate by another 2% and casting range by 20%. Wearing this set, a magical class expert's DPS would be even higher than players in level 110 fine gold equipment. Even after they reached level 110, they couldn't be certain how many pieces of level 110 fine gold equipment they could obtain. It was likely that only the guild's peak experts had any chance of securing a full set. Obtaining enough level 110 fine gold equipment was simply too difficult for experts of their caliber. Fortunately, McCaffrey had already announced that he would auction all weapons and equipment they obtained from the Starlight Fortress. This meant that they'd all get a chance to acquire level 110 secret silver set equipment. How much they obtained would only depend on how many GCPs they had saved up. This was the reason that the Silver Lion Legion members put all of their effort into clearing out the Starlight Fortress's monsters, even without Xueqi saying a word. They actually hoped that Xueqi's group wouldn't participate in the battle, allowing them to keep all of the elemental creatures for themselves. The fortress only had so many monsters, and there wouldn't be enough secret silver set equipment for everyone. Guild leader, are we really going to leave these elemental creatures to Divine Tribes members? Aqua Rose asked as she watched the Silver Lion Legion push through the fortress's main streets. Level 110 secret silver equipment and set equipment might not be important to her or the other experts that had ventured to the Western continent with Xueqi, but it would be to Zero Wing's other experts. Moreover, not even level 110 common equipment had shown up on the market yet, much less level 110 secret silver equipment. They had an advantage with the Crimson Dragon flying ship, and the fortress's magic array currently suppressed the monster's basic attributes. This was an excellent opportunity to secure some level 110 weapons and equipment for the guild. Leaving all of the suppressed monsters for the Silver Lion Legion was a huge waste. That won't be necessary. Although these monsters drop a lot of loot, only the Grand Lords drop secret silver equipment, and they only have a chance of doing so. The drop rate isn't 100%. Since the Silver Lion Legion is willing to help us clear out the fortress, we should allow them to benefit from the task, Xueqi said, chuckling when he watched the idea of level 110 secret silver equipment tempt Aqua Rose. If we try to clear the fortress ourselves, it'll take us a long time. Besides, we have something more important to take care of. As per Xueqi's agreement with Adolphe, the Silver Lion Legion was only here to help Zero Wing capture a city. Now that they had captured the Starlight Fortress, the Legion had no reason to continue the fight. It was well within its rights to turn around and leave. The fact that the Silver Lion Legion was willing to slay the monsters within the fortress was good news for Xueqi. If Zero Wing had to clear out the monsters on its own, he wouldn't have much time left to fortify the fortress. Something more important? After giving the matter some thought, Aqua Rose asked, "Are we raiding the remaining Guardian bosses?" The moment Aqua Rose mentioned the Guardian bosses, Cola and the other Zero Wing experts burst with excitement. They hadn't had a chance to participate in the fight with the Starlight Behemoth directly, so they were itching for action. "No," Xueqi replied, shaking his head. "We'll be taking control of the Fortress Lord's mansion." The Fortress Lord's mansion? Guild leader, don't you already have the Fortress Lord's token? Aqua Rose inquired. The Fortress Lord's token was necessary to take control of the fortress as a whole, and it was the key component in taking over the Fortress Lord's mansion. Normally, when one obtained a Fortress Lord's token, they automatically gained control of the Fortress Lord's mansion. However, Xueqi now informed them that they still needed to secure the mansion. "I do have the Fortress Lord's token, but I don't control the Fortress Lord's mansion yet. In fact, I don't even have partial control over it," Xueqi explained with a bitter smile. Fortresses built before the Great Destruction weren't like more modern fortresses. When one gained the Fortress Lord's token for the latter, they would gain full control of the Fortress Lord's mansion. But that wasn't the case with ancient fortresses. Securing an ancient Fortress Lord's mansion would prove several times more difficult than capturing the fortress itself. The true value of these fortresses didn't lie in the resident monsters' loot nor the items that the Guardian bosses dropped. Rather, the truly valuable items were the ancient legacies, that were stored in the Fortress Lord's mansion. Items such as weapons and equipment were only secondary compared to these ancient legacies. Most of the legacies ancient humans had left behind to reach Tier 3 had been lost to time, and as a result, present-day humans had a far more difficult time completing their Tier 3 and higher promotion quests. Since ancient fortresses like the Starlight Fortress had existed before the Great Destruction, they, more or less, still contained Tier 3 and higher legacies. These legacies were the true treasures within ancient fortresses. At this stage of the game, players only knew that it was difficult to reach Tier 3. They weren't aware that Tier 3 was only the beginning of their journey in God's domain. Once they completed their Tier 3 promotions, growing stronger would become many times more difficult. Why was this the case? The reason was very simple. After reaching Tier 3, Players wouldn't receive any guidance from the system regarding ways to increase their strength. Take Tier 3 skills and spells, for example. These were the foundation for Tier 3 players' power. If players only relied on legacy skill points to acquire Tier 3 skills and spells, they wouldn't be considered a true Tier 3 player. To be a true Tier 3 player, one would need at least 10 Tier 3 skills or spells in their arsenal. One also needed a way to control their mana body, which was also a crucial legacy. These methods were even more important than Tier 3 skills and spells. Although Xueqi was already a master magician, and his control and understanding of magic arrays were far superior to other players, he only had basic control of his mana body. This was also the case for the Western continent's experts, who were particularly skilled at controlling mana. Their mastery with their mana bodies was still in the infantile stages. This was why current Tier 3 experts were no match for Tier 3 NPCs. Many of the legacies within ancient fortresses were related to mana body control, offering methods that allowed humans, who had no physical advantages, to survive in the dangerous environments that had survived the Great Destruction. Guild Leader, how are we supposed to secure the Fortress Lord's mansion? Aqua Rose asked. She realized that Xueqi wasn't joking when she saw his serious expression. If they could not secure the Fortress Lord's mansion, the Starlight Fortress would remain ownerless. If that didn't change before the fortress automatically opened to the public, Zero Wing would be left in a very awkward position. It's simple. All we need to do is pass the legacy trial in the Fortress Lord's mansion. If we fail, we'll only control the fortress on the surface, even with the Fortress Lord's token, Xueqi replied. To put it simply, the Starlight Fortress Lord's token was a ticket to obtain the Starlight Fortress's legacy. How much of the fortress players controlled would depend on how much of its legacy they could activate. The various ancient fortresses' legacy trials differed in difficulty. The known difficulties were normal, hard, hell, Azura, and God mode. The more challenging a legacy trial was, the greater its rewards would be, but clearing the trial would also require more players. Moreover, all legacy trials had a 1-week cooldown. Xueqi then led Aqua Rose and the rest of his companions toward the Starlight Fortress's Fortress Lord's mansion. A magic array currently enveloped the mansion, and not even mythic monsters could break through the barrier, let alone players. Only the player that held the Fortress Lord's token and those that player granted access to could pass through the barrier. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. EU. After walking up to the mansion's entrance, Xueqi retrieved the Fortress Lord's token and started to chant an incantation. Silently, he prayed, "Please, don't let the Starlight Fortress's legacy trial be too high of a difficulty." He hadn't just chosen to capture the Starlight Fortress because its monsters were easier to deal with. Most of his reasoning was based on the fact that it was one of the few small fortresses in Star Valley that had a Fortress Lord's mansion with a weak mana signature. This meant that the legacy the Starlight Fortress protected wasn't particularly powerful, and the legacy trial shouldn't be overly difficult. If he had tried to capture a fortress with a powerful Fortress Lord's mansion, he would have wasted his effort if he couldn't secure control of the mansion after capturing the fortress. When Xueqi finished the incantation recorded on the token, a dark purple, fourfold magic array appeared on the mansion's main door. A set of gigantic golden doors then emerged, and as the doors slowly parted, an ancient aura gushed between them. Crap! Isn't this just a measly small fortress? Why does it have an Azura mode legacy trial? Xueqi was utterly dumbfounded when he saw the golden doors. Chapter 2462. Gold Gate. Aqua Rose and the others couldn't help their surprise when the set of golden doors appeared before the entrance to the Fortress Lord's mansion. Although the doors were only 8 meters tall, they radiated a sacred aura that tamed the nearby ambient mana. This aura even affected the mana within Zero Wing's members. Although the divine runes and images had been engraved on the doors, these runes and images were indiscernible when players tried to examine them. Even so, the blurred runes and images felt somehow heavy and inspired curiosity. What are the markings on the doors? I tried to examine them for a moment, but it made me feel even more exhausted than using advanced combat techniques multiple times in a row, Aqua Rose wondered aloud. After examining the engravings, she pried her gaze away from the doors. She had seen plenty of amazing items in God's domain, but this was the first time she had encountered something that could deplete her concentration so drastically after looking at it for a few seconds. She didn't doubt that if she had stared at the doors for a few more moments, her mind would have been overloaded. Fire Dance and the others also turned away from the doors, afraid they'd pass out if they continued to stare. God's Domains players rarely fainted from concentration depletion, but if it happened, the results would be even more severe than from stamina depletion. When a player's stamina depleted, they'd lose the ability to move, but when they lost all of their concentration, they'd be forced into a deep slumber, which took an incredibly long time to recover from. This could be a fatal setback for players fighting on the front lines. This is normal. The information on this gold gate is a legacy that has been passed down from ancient times. Moreover, this is a relatively complete legacy and far more complex than the combat techniques we've seen thus far. It isn't something players can simply glance at, Xueqi said. When he saw his teammates' curiosity, he revealed a bitter smile and continued, "If you look at this legacy for too long, your recovery could take more than 5 days." The legacy gates left behind in ancient fortresses fell into 3 ranks: Bronze Gate, Silver Gate, and Gold Gate. Each gate was stronger than the last, and the legacies they contained were more complete with each subsequent rank. Similarly, the higher the gate's rank was, the more difficult the legacy trial would be. Many Tier 3 experts would already struggle to clear the normal and hard mode legacy trials on the Bronze Gates. The Gold Gates only contained Azura and God mode legacy trials, which were so difficult that even peak experts would despair at the challenge. Xueqi had assumed that, even in the worst-case scenario, the Starlight Fortress would house a Silver Gate. He had never considered that the Legacy Gate would be Gold rank. Taking control of this Fortress Lord's mansion would be nearly as difficult as capturing a large fortress's Fortress Lord's mansion. Has the system elevated the trial's difficulty because we're the first to capture an ancient fortress? Questions filled Xueqi's mind as he gazed at the Gold Gate before him. Normally, small fortresses had, at most, Silver Gates, and medium fortresses would only have a small chance of containing a Gold Gate. He had never heard of anyone finding a Gold Gate in a small fortress. Forget it. Let's just take this one step at a time. Xueqi shook his head, banishing his worries. He then gritted his teeth and led his team through the Gold Gate. If he refused to participate in the trial now that he had activated it with the Fortress Lord's token, he would have to wait for the token's cooldown to end before he could try again. Moreover, the appearance of a Gold Gate wasn't all bad. This could be a blessing for them. A high-ranked Legacy Gate might be very difficult to clear, but it would also provide greater help as players learned how to control their mana bodies. A Legacy Gate was an ancient fortress's most valuable treasure. It was also the greatest benefit to controlling an ancient fortress. The various powers hadn't initially been aware of this fact in Xueqi's previous life, and had treated the Legacy Gates as a way to gain more control over their fortresses. The various powers had only discovered the Legacy Gates' true value after some time, learning that these gates were the fastest way for players to unlock the full potential of their mana bodies. If players tried to explore and adapt to their mana bodies without such help, unlocking their mana bodies' potential would take ages. As Xueqi and the others walked through the Gold Gate, the world around them warped. The world settled into place again, and Xueqi found himself before a sacred, golden mountain, alone. This golden mountain was several thousand meters tall. Xueqi couldn't even see where the mountain ended. The mountain's aura was just slightly less intense than that of the Tower of 4 Gods. While bathed in the mountain's aura, Xueqi felt an intense pressure bear down on him, reducing his mobility. So, this is a Gold Gates trial? Xueqi looked around him, shocked. During his previous life, he had only ever entered a Bronze Gate, and he had only acquired the entry slot after paying a huge sum. Even so, he had paid the price gladly. If he hadn't, he would have had to rely on his own experiences to explore and adapt to his mana body, like independent players, wasting a lot of precious time in the process. The stronger one's mana body was, the more difficult it was to unlock its potential. Because of this, independent Tier 3 players struggled to surpass the various superpowers Tier 3 experts. Unfortunately, it couldn't be helped. It was simply a benefit of having access to a guild's resources. If that weren't the case, so many players wouldn't be so desperate to join the various superpowers. Within the Gold Gate, Xueqi discovered that the difference between a Bronze and Gold Gate was far greater than he had expected. When he had entered the Bronze Gate, its environment hadn't affected his mental state, but within the Gold Gate, he could feel a void in his mind. Within spaces that had thin traces of mana, such a mental state would be extremely helpful. While players operated in spaces that lacked mana, the harsh environments would affect their ability to learn and grow, even with the support of their mana bodies. While Xueqi and the others quietly observed their surroundings, the phantom of a goddess in dark blue armor appeared before them all. I am this Legacy Gates creator, Eliade. Trial taker, you have 2 days to climb the sacred mountain and pass the trial. If you fail, you will be removed from this place. Only if 3 or more of you reach the sacred mountain's first shrine, will you obtain the Starlight Fortress's bronze mark, securing your hold over the fortress. Remember, this is your only opportunity. You will not be allowed to reach this place again for another month, Eliade explained, watching Xueqi carefully. The moment Eliade finished speaking, she vanished as if she had never existed. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Fortunately, we have 2 days. Xueqi breathed out a sigh of relief after listening to the trial's introduction. He had only been given 1 day to ascend the sacred mountain when he had challenged the Bronze Gate in the past, but now, he would have 2 days to complete the trial. Fortunately, this amount of time should be more than enough for Aqua Rose and his other companions to adapt to this environment. This was, after all, the first time they had entered a legacy trial. Before Xueqi could celebrate his good luck, however, 3 knights in exquisite armor appeared on the sacred mountain. Each of the knights carried swords, and the weakest among them was level 110 and tier 3. The moment these knights manifested, they charged towards Xueqi. The knights were quick, and despite the lack of mana in the area, dense mana surrounded each of them. 3 knights with fully unlocked mana bodies, right off the bat? Xueqi was stunned as he watched the approaching knights. Chapter 2463. Basic unlock. Sensing the intense amount of mana that coated the NPC knight swords, Xueqi wasn't willing to take unnecessary risks. He immediately unsheathed both of his swords and prepared for battle. He might not have been as worried if his opponents had merely been new tier 3 NPCs or tier 3 NPCs below level 100, but against 3 level 110, tier 3 NPCs with fully unlocked mana bodies, he'd lose his life with the slightest mistake. The difference between a locked mana body and one that has been unlocked was like the difference between a refinement realm expert and an ordinary player. This was why some tier 3 NPCs could serve as magistrates in the various kingdoms and empires, while others could only serve as a town or city's guard captain. Some weaker tier 3 NPCs were even limited to guarding a palace's entrance. These different statuses were a result of the state of the NPC's mana bodies. Any tier 3 NPC that could unlock their mana body's full potential would be an elite among those of the same tier. They were no longer ordinary NPCs, but experts. These tier 3 NPCs could beat expert players to a pulp as easily as ordinary players. Reaching their target, the 3 NPC knights slashed their swords at Xueqi from different directions. The knights were perfectly in sync as if they had been comrades in battle for over a dozen years. 2 of the knights attempted to distract Xueqi, while one attacked his blind spot. Furthermore, their attacks were powerful enough to throw great lords of the same level. If any other tier 3 player stood in Xueqi's place, it wouldn't be long before they were defeated. Unfortunately, the 3 knights couldn't fool Xueqi. As a domain realm expert, he quickly determined their attack trajectories. Xueqi instantly countered the knight attacking his blind spot, forcibly altering the knight's attack trajectory and guiding the weapon to collide with the other 2 knights' swords. Pang, pang, pang. The 3 knights stumbled back as a result of the collision, but Xueqi didn't get off scot-free. He also stumbled half a step back, and his right arm trembled slightly from the impact. So, this is a Golden Gates trial? Xueqi glanced down at Killing Ray, which vibrated with a low hum, astonished. He couldn't help but worry for Aqua Rose and the others. There was almost no mana in this world, and because of that, Aqua Rose and his other companions would be lucky if they could exhibit half of their normal combat power, even with the help of their mana bodies. Xueqi's first clash with the 3 knights had been brief, but he could tell that his opponent's combat standards were on par with the Trial Tower's 5th floor. Their combat standards might not be very high, but he was sure they had silver rank mana bodies. Otherwise, there was no way a single clash would cause his arm to go numb with his basic attributes. If even he struggled, it was easy to imagine how the others might fare. Moreover, he was only at the foot of the mountain. He hadn't even started to climb it yet. Ascending the mountain was the goal of this legacy trial, and as players climbed higher, they'd face stronger opponents. Fortunately, they weren't actually required to kill their opponents. As long as players survived against the mountain's residents for 30 minutes, they'd be allowed to pass, but that was still a challenging task. PvP fights rarely lasted more than 10 minutes, not to mention fights against NPCs, since such high-intensity battles required a lot of stamina and concentration. However, during his first clash with the knights, Xueqi sensed the NPCs' mana circuits and how they used the mana within them. Normally, sensing such things in the outside world was quite difficult due to the abundant mana in the area, but the Legacy Gate space had barely any. As a result, the flow of mana within the NPC knights was easily noticeable. Xueqi wasn't a magical class player, but he could clearly sense their mana flow. Only, because these knights only possessed silver mana bodies, their mana body's construction was far simpler than Xueqi's epic ranked mana body. He wouldn't gain much insight from watching these knights fight. Even so, he'd gain more information than he had from unlocking his past bronze mana body. After Xueqi had shoved the three knights back, they quickly regained their postures and launched another attack, giving Xueqi no time to catch a break. This time, however, the knights opted for a different approach. One of the knights focused on attacking Xueqi, while the other two consolidated their mana and waited for an opening. The knights now knew that they were no match for Xueqi's techniques, and they had decided to overwhelm him with brute force. It left Xueqi in a difficult position. His basic attributes were definitely higher than the Tier 3 knights, but with their mana empowering their swords, Xueqi couldn't block the weapons without repercussions. He had no choice but to dodge and retreat. Fortunately, the mana only increased the force behind the knights' attacks. It did not increase their damage. 10 minutes. 15 minutes. 20 minutes. As the battle progressed, Xueqi's excitement grew. He had learned and mimicked the method the knights used to conduct and use the mana within their mana bodies. It was like learning to draw a new magic array. The knights charged at him again, and Xueqi silently guided the mana in his body outward, enveloping his sacred sword. This should be enough. He then swung Killing Ray at the Tier 3 knights' mana-coated swords. Boom! The sound of an explosion echoed from the foot of the mountain. The impact from the blow shoved the three Tier 3 knights stumbling back a step. In contrast, Xueqi remained steady in his original position, and his arm no longer shook. Suddenly, the sound of a system notification reached Xueqi's ears. System. You have unlocked 5% of your epic mana body. I finally grasped the method to unlock my mana body. Xueqi was ecstatic as he glanced down at his weapon. He had finally learned to mimic the way these knights conducted and used their mana. Of course, he could not mimic the knights' methods perfectly, since they weren't compatible with his mana body. He needed to modify his approach. Moreover, he possessed an epic mana body, which had a more complex structure than a silver mana body. This was why he had only unlocked 5% of his mana body with that attack. It's no wonder why so many experts fought to enter gold gates in the past. I've made more than a fortnight's progress in less than half an hour. Seeing the three NPCs eye him hostilely, Xueqi realized how astoundingly effective it was to train within a gold gate's legacy trial. If an expert with a silver mana body stood in his place, they would have likely unlocked all of their mana body with one trip. These knights had offered a perfect example of how to do so, after all, and this environment was the perfect place to observe others' mana bodies. This simply wasn't possible in the outside world. Following which, Xueqi challenged the next group of NPC knights. He wanted to familiarize himself and adapt to the new sensation as quickly as possible. The second group consisted of 6 NPC knights, and they used a completely different method to employ their mana bodies. Individually, they were about as strong as the first 3 knights, but in the end, they were nothing more than lab rats for Xueqi as he further optimized his epic mana body. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. Not only did Xueqi encounter more knights as he climbed the mountain, but the knights also had higher-ranked mana bodies. The first knights only had basic silver mana bodies, but eventually, Xueqi faced NPCs with intermediate silver and advanced silver mana bodies. As a result, Xueqi was able to continue refining his epic mana body. 10%. 15%. 20%. After more than 7 hours of combat and completing his challenge against 6 Tier 3 knights with peak silver mana bodies, Xueqi finally reached the Sacred Mountain's first shrine. After Xueqi entered the first shrine, Eliade, the goddess in dark blue armor, appeared before him again. Eliade radiated an aura that was even beyond that of Tier 5 beings. Trial Taker, you have proven to be quite skilled. You have reached the first shrine within 9 hours. As a reward for your effort, I will present you with 2 options. The first option consists of surviving 3 moves against me. Not only will you clear this trial and enter the mountain's second level by succeeding, but you'll also receive one legacy guidance. If you choose the second option, you will have to face this shrine's guardian. If you win, you will gain access to the second level, but you will not receive additional rewards, Eliade offered Xueqi. You have 3 minutes to consider. Decide carefully. Chapter 2464. Three Divine Swords. Once Eliade finished speaking, she closed her eyes and waited for Xueqi's reply in silence. She showed no intention of speaking further. Players actually have a chance to earn a legacy guidance in a gold gate? The goddess's explanation had stunned Xueqi. Based on what he knew from the past, the legacy gate's creators were lofty beings. They'd only appear before players at the beginning of the legacy trial to explain the rules. Players shouldn't encounter them again after that. Xueqi had never expected that not only would Eliade appear before him near the Sacred Mountain's first shrine, but she'd also offer him 2 choices. Moreover, one of the 2 options would afford him the chance to obtain a legacy guidance. If the experts from his previous life found out about this, they'd try to kill him out of jealousy. Players didn't receive any guidance after reaching Tier 3 in God's domain. They'd have to rely on their own abilities to grow stronger, especially when trying to unlock their mana bodies. Even within the legacy trials, players could only rely on their observations to learn and improve. They wouldn't be given anything on a silver platter. Thus, receiving a legacy guidance was every expert player's dream. Unlocking a mana body's full potential was only a basic condition to activating a Tier 3 mana body. If players could unlock more of their mana body's potential, it could offer even greater benefits. However, unlocking more of a mana body's full potential was insanely difficult. If players had taken the wrong path during their early days, they'd have almost no chance of surpassing 100% potential. Players would have to settle for the most basic level of mana body. If all players were offered a chance to receive guidance from an ancient legacies, far more of the past's peak experts would have been able to reach Tier 5. The stronger a player's mana body was, the easier it'd be to complete their future promotion quests. This was why some experts with silver mana bodies had reached Tier 5, while some experts with gold mana bodies had been stuck at Tier 4. When Eliade had presented Xueqi with 2 options, he had felt as if he were dreaming. Lady Eliade, I choose your challenge. Xueqi instantly decided. Challenging Eliade was undoubtedly reckless, but if he missed this opportunity, he'd regret it for the rest of his life. Even if he couldn't take control of the Starlight Fortress's Fortress Lord's mansion now, he could try again after the token's cooldown. However, if he passed up this opportunity to challenge Eliade, he might not get another chance to earn a legacy guidance. He had an epic mana body, and unlocking its potential would be far more difficult than with a gold mana body. Just trying to unlock 100% of its potential was an immensely difficult challenge, not to mention unlocking more than that. Excellent. You have made a wise decision. You will not receive another chance to challenge me, let alone obtain a legacy guidance, no matter how many times you come here, Eliade said as she opened her eyes. When she looked at Xueqi, a hint of recognition flashed in her eyes. However, don't think that you can withstand 3 of my attacks. Even if I limit my strength to Tier 3, you have less than a 10% chance of completing my challenge with your sealed epic mana body. Eliade then pulled a blue greatsword, whose tip had been buried in the ground before her, and raised it above her head. A frightening amount of mana suddenly surrounded her, and a mana storm manifested around Eliade's greatsword. The storm was so powerful that it could even tear apart space. Xueqi could sense that the phenomena weren't due to a skill or spell. Eliade was merely executing a normal attack. Now face me. First sword, light shadow. As she spoke those words, Eliade swung her greatsword down at Xueqi, who stood over 40 yards away. A gigantic blade of mana appeared in the goddess's hands and descended on Xueqi, splitting apart space as it passed. So, this is the true method of utilizing a mana body? Xueqi was dumbfounded as the blade grew near. He had met many Tier 5 NPCs, but he had never met one that had such mastery over their mana body. Although Eliade had suppressed her strength to Tier 3, her normal attack still had the power of a Tier 4 skill. Without hesitation, Xueqi activated Heavenly Dragon's power. The legacy trial was located in a different realm. Although players were prohibited from using invulnerability skills, They could use any other skills or spells they possessed. This was why Xuefeng dared to accept Eliade's challenge. Divine runes immediately appeared around Xuefeng's body, substantially increasing his strength. He then brandished his swords at the descending mana weapon. Secret technique: lightning flash. Boom. When the weapons collided, the impact created a powerful shockwave that shook the surrounding area. Even the ground trembled at its might. The boom of the collision echoed across the entire sacred mountain. A figure then shot out of the dust cloud that encompassed the battlefield. It was none other than Xuefeng. Not only had he lost 1/5 of his HP, but he also failed to stabilize his footing after he landed, tumbling to the ground. Before Xuefeng could return to his feet, however, the goddess was already poised to attack again. This time, however, she positioned her sword beside her, prepared to execute a horizontal slash. Second sword. Holy Devour. Another mana storm brewed around her, threatening to devour everything in its path. This time, Xuefeng could feel the storm suck away the mana within him, and the pressure that bore down on him made it somewhat difficult to move. Xuefeng had no time to respond properly before the Eliade swung her greatsword. A torrent of fire manifested before Xuefeng, destabilizing space around it. These flames raged as if they needed to devour everything they touched, including space. These flames were more than twice as powerful as the earlier mana sword. Are you kidding me? Xuefeng's shock reached unprecedented levels as he watched the torrent of fire blast toward him. Normally, not even heroes could exhibit basic Tier 4 power with normal Tier 3 attacks. But not only did the goddess's horizontal swing contain Tier 4 power, but it was also at the intermediate rank. No one would believe him if he retold this tale. Despite his surprise, however, Xuefeng didn't hesitate. Realizing that he couldn't afford to hold back, Xuefeng activated Blade Liberation and executed Lightning Flash once more. Boom! Space exploded the moment the two fighters' weapons met. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Like before, Eliade's attack sent Xuefeng flying, and this time, it left him with less than 50% of his HP. However, before Xuefeng could stand up, he heard Eliade's voice. Third sword. Holy Annihilation. Eliade showed no intention of slowing her assault. Leaping into the air, she rose above Xuefeng and swung her great sword downward. This time, the goddess's attack didn't include any mana fluctuations, but Xuefeng discovered that he couldn't move. He felt as if he were surrounded by enemies, and he could only watch as Eliade's great sword descended toward him. This attack was many times stronger than her second swing. Power of Destruction, activate. Chapter 2465. Silvermark. Along with Xuefeng's low shout, disintegration power started flowing out of the disintegration armor and set the surrounding space aquiver. At the same time, a portion of the disintegration power entered Xuefeng's body, instantly elevating him to the Tier 4 realm. Suddenly, the spatial restrictions and frightening pressure that originally bound Xuefeng's body weakened considerably, allowing him to move again. However, despite these changes, he did not feel safe. On the contrary, his complexion turned even grimmer than before. Previously, when he was still at Tier 3, he had felt that Eliade's current attack did not carry as much mana as her second attack. However, after reaching Tier 4, he realized just how wrong he was. Currently, the space within 50 yards of Eliade was actually filled with mana as dense as steel. In God's domain, mana's existence was akin to air. It would condense into a misty state only after reaching a sufficiently high density. However, the mana surrounding Eliade had surpassed the misty and liquid states. Normally, in God's domain, the more refined the mana was, the greater the energy it would contain. Take mana that was in a gaseous state and mana that had concentrated into magic crystals. The amounts of energy each contained were worlds apart. Seeing Eliade's frightening attack descending toward him, Xuefeng pushed his five senses to their very limits and executed his strongest skill, Void Slash, inwardly praying, "You must block it." In the next moment, 6 sword lights appeared from the void, then merged into one to meet Eliade's greatsword. Combined with the effects of all of Xuefeng's berserk skills, this attack could be said to be the peak of Xuefeng's current capabilities. In fact, he had even executed Void Slash at a 100% completion rate. The power of this attack could undoubtedly send mythic monsters of the same level flying. Most likely, Even Tier 4 NPCs would be no exception. Boom! A deafening boom echoed throughout the surroundings after the attacks of both sides collided. The entire sacred mountain had even started trembling slightly. In the next moment, a figure flew out of the sacred mountain's first shrine and landed right at the foot of the sacred mountain, creating a crater that was over 3 meters deep. What a pity! I have waited a long time for a challenger with an epic mana body to show up. If only he had unlocked his mana body before coming here. Combined with the power of a Tier 4 existence, he might have been able to withstand my final move, Eliade said to herself, sighing when she saw Xueqi disappearing from the shrine. However, just as she was about to leave, she suddenly sensed something. Her figure then disappeared from the shrine and reappeared at the mountain's foot. To be precise, she appeared beside the crater of Xueqi's crash. He didn't die. Surprise flashed in Eliade's eyes for the first time when she saw Xueqi getting to his feet in the crater. Despite the swordsman receiving her attack, his HP had not decreased by even a single point. Only, visible spatial cracks surrounded him. However, these cracks were mending themselves, and eventually, a perfect barrier formed around him. How close! If I didn't have the Nightwalker's Cape's Void Shield, that attack definitely would have killed me. Xueqi breathed out a sigh of relief as he looked at the barrier protecting him. He had still underestimated Eliade's final attack. That final attack was even stronger than those of the Crimson Dragon flying ship's mana pulse cannons, practically rivaling the flying ship's magic elven cannons already. He had never heard of anyone exhibiting power at the peak of Tier 4 with merely a normal Tier 3 attack. Fortunately, he had more than one fragmented legendary item on him, one of which was even for defense. Otherwise, only death awaited him in this trial. After inwardly celebrating for a moment, Xueqi climbed out of the crater quickly and walked up to Eliade. Lady Eliade, may I know if I passed your trial? Xueqi asked as he looked at the goddess. Although he survived, he had been sent flying all the way down the sacred mountain. Since his agreement with Eliade was for him to receive 3 of her moves, he wasn't sure if getting sent flying out of the shrine was already grounds for disqualification. Eliade had not stated the conditions for qualifications clearly. You passed, Eliade said, nodding. Moreover, your performance was excellent. You actually managed to receive 3 of my moves without having unlocked your Tier 3 mana body. Of all the challengers I have come across throughout the years, you are the first to accomplish such a feat as a reward. I will grant you not only a legacy guidance but also the Starlight Fortress's silver mark. After saying so, Eliade drew a silver rune in the air and imprinted it on the Fortress Lord's token tied around Xueqi's wrist. System. Congratulations! You have obtained the silver mark and become the Starlight Fortress's Silver Lord. You may freely enter the Fortress Lord's mansion and make use of the Starlight Fortress's advanced functions. System. You have completed the challenge of the Legacy Gates creator. Rewarding level +1 and 1 legacy guidance from Eliade. Upon receiving the series of system notifications, Xueqi fell into a daze. He never thought that the rewards for this challenge would be so generous. Just the opportunity to receive a legacy guidance was already as valuable as a fragmented legendary item. In fact, if the peak experts of his previous life had known about this, they might have even willingly exchanged a fragmented legendary item just to receive a legacy guidance. After all, in God's domain, one's own strength had the utmost priority. External items such as weapons and equipment only serve to bolster a person's existing strength. Moreover, so long as one was sufficiently strong, obtaining fragmented legendary items was not that difficult a task. Take the independent experts of adventurer teams, for example. Despite these experts not having any major corporations or superpowers backing them, some of them had still reached the apex of God's domain. Meanwhile, these people had accomplished this feat by relying entirely on their own strength. However, aside from receiving a legacy guidance, he had actually received the Starlight Fortress's silver mark as well. If the various superpowers in his previous life were to find out about this, they would definitely want to eat him alive. In the past, in order to increase their authority in the ancient fortresses they controlled, the various superpowers had invested countless manpower and resources into nurturing their peak experts. However, extremely few superpowers had managed to obtain an ancient fortress's silver mark, especially for ancient fortresses that housed a gold gate. This was because the silver mark was no longer something just a handful of peak experts could attain. Obtaining a silver mark from a legacy gate required 10 experts to clear the Sacred Mountain's second shrine and 3 experts to reach the Sacred Mountain's peak within one challenge attempt. Moreover, The difficulty of a Sacred Mountain's second level was far greater than that of the first level. The Sacred Mountain's first level served as a foundational level for the Legacy Trial. It functioned more as an educational tool than a challenge. However, it was a different story once players reached the Sacred Mountain's second level. The second level and beyond would differentiate the strong from the weak. They were not meant to teach players anything, and all that players could do on these levels was figure out a way to survive. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. In the case of the second level of a Bronze Gate Sacred Mountain, Tier 3 players would face Tier 3 heroic spirits that possessed extremely high combat standards. The weakest among them could rival half-step refinement realm experts. Even worse, players had to go up against multiple heroic spirits simultaneously. As for the third level, rumor had it that the opponents were bona fide Tier 3 heroes. Of course, players were no longer required to survive for as long as 30 minutes on the second level and beyond. Nevertheless, they still needed to last 10 minutes. If even the Bronze Gates trial was already so arduous, Xueqi did not even dare imagine what kind of opponents awaited him on the second level of the Gold Gates trial. Alright, you have a choice to make. Do you wish to receive guidance on how to unlock your epic mana body, or do you wish to receive guidance on mana techniques? Eliade asked as she looked at Xueqi's stunned expression. Chapter 2466. Heavenly Blue Successor. There's also the option to learn mana techniques? Xueqi could not help but hesitate when he heard the options Eliade gave him. Mana technique was a familiar term, a mana usage technique that players could use only after reaching Tier 3 and obtaining their mana body. It was categorized as a type of combat technique in God's domain. Only, combat techniques focused on the usage of a person's physical body for combat, while mana techniques focused on the usage of a person's mana for the same. However, only an extremely small number of players had the opportunity to learn mana techniques in God's domain because the knowledge had long been lost. Normally, players had to rely on their own inspiration to create mana techniques. As for Xueqi, even after playing God's domain for a decade during his previous life, he never managed to learn a single mana technique. If it were before he had witnessed Eliade's 3 attacks, he would have most likely chosen to receive guidance on how to unlock his epic mana body without any hesitation. This was because the mana techniques he had seen experts use in his previous life hadn't been particularly powerful. Those mana techniques only bolstered the strength of existing skills and spells slightly, not even as useful as combat techniques. However, from the goddess's attacks, it would seem that he had been under a misconception. After all, Eliade's mana techniques allowed her to exhibit strength at the peak of Tier 4 despite having suppressed herself to Tier 3. The strength of her mana techniques was many times superior to bronze combat techniques. Of course, part of the reason why she could exhibit such strength with her mana technique was her high comprehension of the technique. Even so, this had still allowed Xueqi to get a general idea of the power of mana techniques. If he could master Eliade's third sword, Holy Annihilation, then he really would be able to move unhindered through the entire God's domain. Normally, players had to rely on legendary items to transcend tiers. Moreover, the higher one's tier was, the more difficult it would be to transcend tiers. Just the gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 was already massive. Even with a legendary item, the best a Tier 3 player could do when fighting a Tier 4 player of equal combat standards would be a draw. It would take more than just a legendary item to win against a bona fide Tier 4 player. Eliade's mana techniques, on the other hand, only needed one to unlock their mana body to transcend tiers. Meanwhile, given sufficient time, players could unlock even epic mana bodies to 100% potential. You have 30 seconds to consider. If you don't make a decision, I will take it as you giving up the opportunity to learn. You have only this one chance, so I hope you consider your decision well, Eliade said as she looked at Xueqi. As soon as Eliade finished speaking, a system timer appeared before him, the timer counting down the seconds. 30 seconds. 25 seconds. 20 seconds. The ticking sounds were like a countdown to death, and they stimulated Xueqi's mind. He had only this one opportunity to learn a mana technique. After he mastered it, he could even teach it to others. This mana technique would be a great help for Zero Wing's future. However, if he wished to unlock his epic mana body past 100% potential, he could only rely on Eliade's guidance. Otherwise, on his own, the chances of him breaking through the 100% threshold were practically zero. You have 10 more seconds to consider, Eliade reminded when she saw Xuefeng still in deep thought. However, Eliade's reminder did not catch Xuefeng's attention. On the contrary, he sank even deeper into thought now. You have 5 seconds left, Eliade prompted once more. Decide. At Eliade's final reminder, Xuefeng snapped out of his daze and took a deep breath. Lady Eliade, I choose the guidance on my epic mana body. Xuefeng said with determination. Are you certain? Eliade asked, gazing at him seriously. I am very certain, Xuefeng confirmed, nodding. In his opinion, a mana technique was indeed amazing. In fact, the value of Eliade's mana technique surpassed even the value of legendary items. However, gaining the ability to unlock his epic mana body past the 100% threshold was much more important since a player's mana body was the foundation for everything. In his previous life, every player that had set foot into the realm of Tier 6 had broken through the 100% threshold. If he wanted to have a chance at reaching Tier 6, then he had to develop his mana body beyond 100%. As for Eliade's mana technique, while it indeed could increase players' combat power by a substantial degree, tiers trumped everything else. This was especially true for Tier 6. Even if said Tier 5 player was armed with an extremely powerful legendary weapon, they would, at most, be able to fight the weakest of Tier 6 players to a standstill. Defeating a Tier 6 player would be utterly impossible. Needless to say, it would be the same when relying on mana techniques. During ancient times, humans possessed complete mana technique legacies. Nevertheless, they were still incapable of contending against Tier 6 gods. Hence, tiers were everything in God's domain. Take the current God's domain, for example. Tier 2 players were helpless against Tier 3 players. This was the case even for the various superpowers Tier 2 experts. Currently, the various superpowers could compete with each other only by using Tier 3 players. Even if Tier 2 players were amazing and could defeat current Tier 3 experts, if they were incapable of promoting to Tier 3 themselves, it was only a matter of time before they were left behind by Tier 3 players in terms of basic attributes as players reached higher levels. Excellent! When Eliade heard Xuefeng's determined reply, an exquisite smile appeared on her flawless face. At the same time, the sound of a system notification entered Xuefeng's ears once more. System. Congratulations! You have passed the hidden trial selection of power, and received Eliade's recognition. A hidden trial. Xuefeng received a fright when he heard this system notification. He never thought that this challenge would actually include a hidden trial. NPCs in God's domain had different personalities. Normally, they only gave players straightforward trials. However, there were NPCs that would give players double trials. In the case of these double trials, if players failed to clear the hidden trial, clearing the surface trial would be meaningless. They still wouldn't receive any rewards. Since you have chosen to seek guidance on your mana body, it seems you have not been misled by the temptation of power. During ancient times, humans have constantly pursued the ultimate strength. Although they eventually obtained this ultimate strength, they also faced destruction because of it, Eliade said. In a pleased tone she continued, You, however, did not fall prey to the power I displayed. You have passed my trial. From now onward, you are my successor and are qualified to obtain my legacy. System. Congratulations! You have completed the challenge of the Heavenly Blue Saint, Eliade, and become her successor. Rewarding Mana Body Legacy and Holy Annihilation Technique Legacy. After the system notification ended, Eliade took out 2 memory crystals that gave off a colorful glow and handed them to Xuefeng. Of these 2 memory crystals, one of them records the method to unlock epic mana bodies, and the other records the mana technique I created. You may use each of them only once. I hope you utilize them properly, Eliade said before vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only a stunned Xuefeng at the foot of the sacred mountain. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, that was really close. Xuefeng sighed in relief after Eliade disappeared. If not for him having long known the importance of the mana body and the strength of tiers, he would have most likely chosen Eliade's mana technique instead. After all, from what he had seen, Eliade's mana technique would provide players with a huge boost in combat power. So long as current Tier 3 players learned Eliade's mana technique, their combat power would soar to the peak of Tier 3, possibly even the Tier 4 standard. Meanwhile, if one possessed Tier 4 combat power at this stage of the game, they would definitely be invincible among players. Who could possibly resist such a temptation? However, if he had really chosen to acquire Eliade's mana technique, he would have ended up with nothing at all. Now that I have obtained the mark and legacy, it's time to return. After snapping out of his daze, Xueqi stored the 2 memory crystals before making his way to the teleportation array for leaving the sacred mountain. He did not hurry to use the memory crystals. After all, they were one-off items. How much knowledge he could absorb from them would depend entirely on himself. It would be a huge waste if he did not use the memory crystals in an ideal state and environment. Chapter 2467, Legacy Room Star Valley, Starlight Fortress. A spatial tear appeared before the entrance of the Fortress Lord's mansion as Xueqi teleported out of the Legacy Gate. Currently, several figures were resting before the entrance, every one of which looked exhausted, as if they had just fought a battle that lasted several days and nights. Their eyes were bloodshot, and their bodies were felt weak and sore all over. Guild Leader. A trace of surprise flashed in Kola's eyes when he saw Xueqi coming out of the spatial tear. Aside from Kola, Shadow Sword, Turtle Dove, Alluring Summer, and Iluafe, who sat beside him, were similarly stunned by this scene. They knew what the situation inside the Legacy Gate was very clearly. Out of their team of 10, the one with the highest chance of clearing the first level was undoubtedly Xueqi. Now, however, Xueqi was actually the 6th person to come out of the Legacy Gate. This development boggled their minds. After all, in terms of combat standards and basic attributes, Xueqi was the strongest among them. Even the standard of his mana body was unmatched. Theoretically, even if Xueqi failed to conquer the Sacred Mountain's first level, he still should have been the last one to come out of the Legacy Gate. Ignoring the strange gazes Kola and the others were giving him, Xueqi asked, "Only the 5 of you have come out?" "MHM. Big Sis Fire and the others are still inside." Kola nodded stiffly. They made such huge improvements during this period? Xueqi was surprised by this situation. The fact that Fire Dance and the others remained inside the Legacy Gate until now meant that they were close to clearing the Sacred Mountain's first level already. The first level of a Gold Gate's Sacred Mountain. Xueqi had personally experienced the difficulty of the Gold Gate's trial. From his experience, everyone, aside from Yen Tianqing, shouldn't have much of a chance at clearing the Sacred Mountain's first level. After all, the Gold Gate's trial placed much more importance on players' combat standards than on basic attributes. No matter how powerful their basic attributes were, their attacks couldn't be stronger than those of Tier 3 NPCs that had fully unlocked their mana bodies. Meanwhile, of those that had come to the Western continent with Xueqi this time, Aqua Rose, Fire Dance, and Violet Cloud, 3 of the 4 players that had entered the Tower of 4 Gods, remained inside although he had already exited. Gentle Snow was staying in the Black Dragon Empire to handle the guild's affairs. Xueqi never thought that Aqua Rose, Fire Dance, and Violet Cloud would last this long inside the Legacy Gate. Although he had already known that all 3 of them had reached the Void Realm standard and that Violet Cloud had even learned a bronze combat technique, they still shouldn't be capable of surviving until now. However, Xueqi quickly shook his head, not dwelling on the matter. After all, the stronger Aqua Rose and the others became, the better it would be for Zero Wing. Following which, he looked at Kola and the others and asked, "Right, what kind of gains did you get inside? How much of your mana body did you manage to unlock?" The real treasure hidden inside an ancient fortress was the mana body legacy. Hence, it did not matter whether players managed to clear the fortress's legacy trial or not. The crucial part was how much players learned from the legacy trial. If players simply focused on clearing the trial and failed to learn anything, then it would be a huge loss. "I've already unlocked it to 75%, Kola replied in a slightly prideful tone. Although he was the first person to exit the Legacy Gate, he had unlocked the most potential out of their group of 5. In fact, had he managed to push through one more batch of opponents, he might have been able to unlock 80% of his mana body's potential. It should be known that every 10% potential unlocked in a mana body would enhance one's normal attacks, skills, and spells significantly. Upon hearing Kola's prideful tone, Shadow Sword and the others eyed him with contempt. Kola had unlocked merely 5% to 10% more potential than they had. That was nothing for him to boast about. Shortly after Shadow Sword and the others finished reporting their progress, 4 spatial tiers suddenly opened up before the Fortress Lord's mansion, one after another. A figure then walked out of each spatial tear. These 4 figures belonged to none other than Aqua Rose and the rest of the Zero-Wing contingent. At the same time as Aqua Rose and the others exited, an additional bronze mark appeared on Xueqi's Fortress Lord's token. The knights on the 2nd level are simply overpowered. Every one of their attacks rivals mythic monsters. Who could possibly block those attacks? Yan Tianqing's expression turned ugly when he was teleported out of the Legacy Gate. You cleared the 1st level? Xueqi asked as he took in Yan Tianqing's miserable state. But the 2nd level is far too difficult. Those knights are basically at the Tier 4 standard already, and they're even more difficult than mythic monsters, Yan Tianqing replied, nodding with some disappointment at this outcome. Not bad. The 2nd level's knights all possess gold magic bodies. Their magic bodies are not the slightest bit inferior to yours. Moreover, their magic bodies are fully unlocked while yours is not. If multiple knights gang up on you, it is only natural for you to get defeated, Xueqi said, not the slightest bit surprised by this outcome. He then swept his gaze over Yan Tianqing's group of 4 and asked, how far have you gotten in unlocking your mana bodies? NPC knights that possessed gold mana bodies simply had too large an advantage over current players like themselves. Even Xueqi would have to activate Heavenly Dragon's power to block their attacks. I currently have it unlocked up to 90%, Yan Tianqing reported, slightly disappointed. It would be great if I could have continued fighting for a little while longer. Kola and the others gazed at him enviously. Upon hearing that, they never thought that the 2nd level's NPC knights actually possessed gold mana bodies. Gaining the opportunity to observe these knights would definitely provide them with significant help. I'm just a little ways off myself. I managed to unlock mine up to 95%. If I could continue observing for 20 more minutes, I might have been able to unlock my mana body completely, Aqua Rose said, thoroughly bummed. The mana that the 2nd level's knights exuded was simply too frightening. Every one of their attacks carried power close to the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, they also possessed very high combat standards, basically rivaling Refinement Realm experts. Worst of all, her ability to wield mana was restricted due to the harsh environment. Fire Dance and Violet Cloud similarly shook their heads in frustration. Although both of them had unlocked 95% of their mana body's potential, they still couldn't contend against the 2nd level's knights. Right, guild leader, Divine Tribe contacted me previously. They said that there is something they need to discuss with us. However, as we were still inside the Legacy Gate, I told them that we had some urgent matters to deal with and had them rest inside their temporary residence for now, Aqua Rose suddenly said. That isn't an urgent matter, Xueqi said, chuckling. It'll be the same if we go after all of you have fully unlocked your mana bodies. Unlock our mana bodies? Aqua Rose was puzzled by Xueqi's words. They had just come out of the Legacy Gate. Without the help of the Legacy Gate, it would be incredibly difficult for them to make any more progress. Fully unlocking their mana bodies might even take up to a fortnight. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. An ancient fortress's Legacy Gate is indeed the fastest place for players to unlock their mana bodies. However, the Fortress Lord's mansion has something called a Legacy Room. Although its training effects aren't as excellent as the Legacy Gates, it allows players to experience a fully unlocked mana body for 3 minutes. I believe this experience should be of significant help for you all, Xueqi said, nodding. The Legacy Room was the core of the Fortress Lord's mansion. Only after players obtained the rights to control the Fortress Lord's mansion would they be allowed to use it. Moreover, the room could be used only 12 times a month, and each player could use it only once a month. During Xueqi's previous life, the various superpowers that controlled an ancient fortress allowed only peak experts that were close to fully unlocking their mana bodies to make use of the Legacy Room. Now that Aqua Rose and the others had managed to unlock at least 70% of their mana body's potential, they would have a very high chance of fully unlocking their mana bodies if they utilized the Legacy Room. Xueqi naturally had to let them try. After saying so, Xueqi removed the seal on the Fortress Lord's mansion and led everyone inside. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.